Expand. The violet-robed man who looked like a demon devil had skin covered with scales. Even his face had transformed. His eyes were deeply sunken in, whereas his jaws protruded, revealing a mouthful of wicked fangs. He had a long horn with a razor-sharp tip, as well as a lashing tail. He had already been shaken by Meng Hao, but now he had no choice but to attack. He roared as his body burst into flames, his cultivation base instantly surpassing that of the three nascent divinities nearby. He became a cyclone that shot directly toward Meng Hao. As he neared, he stretched out both hands in front of him and made a ripping motion. "Rupture the heavens," he roared, causing everything around him to shake. A huge rift was ripped open in the air, like a gigantic mouth that wanted to swallow Meng Hao whole. However, even as the rift was almost upon Meng Hao gave a cold glance in the old man's direction. It was a single glance, a simple look. The rift collapsed, and the fiend-form old man let out a miserable shriek. Meng Hao's gaze was like that of a god. Indescribable pressure bore down on the old man, causing first his hands, and then both arms to explode in a haze of blood. His eyes were red, and he tilted his head, attempting to use his horn to pierce through the pressure radiating out from Meng Hao's eyes. Perhaps he couldn't kill Meng Hao, but at least he could wound him. However, just as the horn seemed about to stab Meng Hao, he reached up and grabbed it. His expression was calm, but he seemed to be recalling the brutal image of the old man slaughtering southern domain cultivators earlier. Meng Hao twisted his hand, and a cracking sound rang out as the horn snapped off. Screaming, the old man tried to attack with his tail, but before he could get near, a rumbling sound filled his body, which then began to collapse into pieces. Terror flooded his mind, submerging him completely. His nascent divinity burst out, terrified, and tried to flee. As it did, one word blared out in his mind. "Invincible." Down below on the ground, the cultivators gasped, eyes wide with disbelief. 4 of the 5 peak Tao-seeking experts from the northern reaches now had nothing left but nascent divinities. It was unclear why Meng Hao hadn't destroyed them. If he wanted to, though, all 4 of his opponents would already be dead. As for Meng Hao, he was calm and unruffled, and invincible. The last person left was the #1 most powerful expert from the northern reaches, the imperial bloodline clan chief, who was still in the form of a primordial lightning dragon. He roared at the top of his lungs, and it was a roar filled with indignation, despair, and even the desire for death. "Die!" he howled. Lightning crackled as he shot through the air, surrounding him with a lake of lightning. It was lightning summoned from the highest heavens. Apparently he wished to die together with Meng Hao. At this point, the air behind Meng Hao rippled, the sky above him rumbled, and the ground down below quaked. The entire world seemed to be in motion, set off as a foil to Meng Hao himself. The immortal qi in his body grew stronger as he finally rose completely to his feet. He was surrounded by a boundless, blinding light as he gazed at the incoming imperial bloodline clan chief. Suddenly, behind him, all of the motion swirled together to form a giant. The giant looked exactly like Meng Hao in every way, but was unimaginably tall. Its head touched the sky, and its feet were planted on the ground. Its body emanated a shocking pressure that caused the land to quake. The countless cultivators down on the ground below were completely shocked to find that their cultivation bases were utterly suppressed. Gradually, all of the natural law in the area began to swirl around the enormous figure behind Meng Hao. Starlight from the starry sky outside of the vortex up above shone down on it, bathing it in brightness, giving it a completely unearthly energy. It looked like a paragon. The enormous image behind him looked very much like the type of image that Tao-seeking cultivators could normally summon. And yet, it was completely different. The images summoned by Tao-seeking cultivators were illusory, powerful beings from ancient times who were summoned via means of a magical technique. In contrast, the image behind Meng Hao was like a projection of himself. Of the 2 kinds of images, one was illusory and the other was a projection. Although neither were real, the difference in caliber between the 2 was like the difference between heaven and earth. In fact, one day, if Meng Hao ever became strong enough, then anyone who received his approval could summon the same image by calling upon his name. That was another area in which his image was completely different. This image was referred to by a unique name. Dharma idol. It's a Dharma idol. He actually summoned a Dharma idol. Only immortals can summon Dharma idols, but look, he has one. As soon as the Dharma idol appeared behind Meng Hao, everything began to rumble. All of the lands of South Heaven were shaken. The Tao-seeking experts of the northern reaches, the western desert and the southern domain all gasped. In the eastern lands, gasps of disbelief could be heard in all of the ancient sects. He just stepped into Tao-seeking, but I can't see his cultivation base. That can only happen in that legendary state when both the fleshly body and the cultivation base are in the Tao-seeking stage. That man couldn't have a Tao-seeking fleshly body, could he? Impossible. Immortal Qi. He actually has immortal Qi. And it's not false immortal Qi, but that of a true immortal Qi. He hasn't even stepped into the boundless immortal realm, and yet he already has that aura. The path to immortality opens every 10,000 years. Don't tell me that South Heaven's sole true immortal from this generation is that man. He actually produced a Dharma idol. That's a divine ability that, according to the legends, belongs only to immortals. That kid is half a step into true immortality. Other than the Jai clan and a few other mysterious beings, this kid could stand up to anybody. The great sects of the eastern lands were all shaken. Meng Hao hovered in the air above the battlefield, his face calm, his aura devoid of anything even remotely vile. Now he looked like a scholar from the mortal world. He wore a green robe and his hair was no longer white but pitch black. His eyes shone brightly, and the enormous Dharma idol behind him radiated a shocking pressure that stifled the breathing of everyone in the area. Next to him was his second true self, which radiated monstrous devil flames. It was sinister to the extreme, filled with a vileness that carried the desire to kill. It looked around at the world with cold eyes. Die! The imperial bloodline clan chief roared as he threw all caution to the wind, bearing down on Meng Hao in his primordial lightning dragon form. Meng Hao looked at the man and then waved his finger. As he did, the Dharma idol behind him also waved its finger. It seemed to blot out the heavens, transforming into a gigantic land mass that descended to slam into the primordial lightning dragon. A massive boom rattled out. The primordial lightning dragon collapsed into pieces. The imperial bloodline clan chief coughed up blood and staggered backward, his face filled with astonishment. He came to a stop several hundred meters back, where he coughed up 7 or 8 more mouthfuls of blood, his body listless and weak. "You," he said, his face deathly white. Meng Hao was now so powerful that the simple wave of a finger left the man seriously injured. Then Meng Hao's gaze fell upon him, and he felt his mind reeling as an intense, indescribable pressure weighed down him. It felt like countless bolts of lightning were about to slam into him. "That little cauldron of yours is connected to me by destiny," said Meng Hao, a bashful expression appearing on his face. He waved his hand, causing the imperial bloodline clan chief's lightning cauldron to fly over onto his palm. The imperial bloodline clan chief's face grew even more pale, and he coughed up more blood. He seemed to have aged rapidly in just the past few moments, his eyes shining with hopelessness. Behind him, the other northern reaches peak Tao-seeking experts shook with fear as they looked at Meng Hao. His gaze swept over them, and they trembled so violently that it seemed their nascent divinities would explode at any moment. Finally his gaze shifted to the forces of the western desert and the south-cleaving sentinels. "Fellow Taoists from the western desert, many thanks for your assistance. This kindness will be remembered by the southern domain for generation after generation. It will never be forgotten." With that he clasped hands and bowed deeply. Immediately, the south-cleaving sentinels bowed back with deep respect, as did all of the western desert cultivators. Meng Hao's incredible bravery and power, coupled with the events of past years, made it so that the western desert cultivators viewed Meng Hao as one of their own. "This war is now over," said Meng Hao, looking out at the northern reaches cultivators. "More killing would be meaningless. There is no path for you to return to your home, so you will stay in the southern domain. The price you will pay for this invasion is that your cultivation bases will be sealed. From this generation forward, your bloodlines will not produce nascent soul cultivation bases. Your path to immortality is broken. Henceforth, you are felon citizens." Meng Hao's voice was calm, but his words struck like thunder, making it clear that his words would be strictly enforced. When he said felon citizens, the words were branded deeply into the hearts and minds of the northern reaches cultivators, and they knew that this would be their identity for generations to come. Furthermore, among the more than 100,000 northern reaches cultivators, all of the nascent soul cultivators trembled as their nascent souls involuntarily shattered. Their cultivation bases fell, and in the blink of an eye, not a single nascent soul cultivator could be found among the northern reaches forces. Next, he turned his attention to the Tao-seeking experts. "As for you people, Your war has shattered the southern domain. Innumerable cultivators have died, and the spiritual energy of the land has become sparse. The 5 of you will be suppressed and turned into the southern domain cultivators, foundation in the future. For generations to come, the power of your nascent divinities will be extracted to replenish the spiritual energy in the southern domain. Even as he spoke, he waved his hand, causing the 9th mountain, which had been trembling this entire time, to suddenly rise up into the air. Revealed beneath was a woman, blood oozing from her mouth, left with only a tiny scrap of life force. The mountain then shot toward the 5 Tao-seeking experts. Henceforth, this mountain shall be called Sin of the North. Meanwhile, back in the Jai clan, in a hidden location, the armless young patriarch took a deep breath. A look of regret appeared in his eyes, and he shook his head. Fang clan, he murmured, son of a chosen with 50% of the power of a true immortal, half a step into true immortality, that mark on his hand, it must be, that mark. A strange light appeared in his eyes and he smiled. Apparently he had just recalled something. Interesting. I just remembered that the main branch of the Fang clan on planet East Victory has a peerless chosen by the name of Fang Wei. If the 2 of them ever meet, I wonder what will happen. At the same time, the couple in the Tower of Tang wore excited expressions. They exchanged a glance, then clasped hands and stepped forward. It's time to reunite. We've been waiting for this day for so long. 7th year tribulation. Ah, the 7th year tribulation. My son has transcended the tribulation. Now the fish will make its leap into being a dragon amongst men. 1. This is a reference to a common Chinese expression about a fish leaping to success and becoming a dragon. Chapter 795, Half a Step into Immortality. This chapter was sponsored by Anonymous. Chapter 796, Putting the North in its place. No. I've practiced cultivation for thousands of years. I refuse to be suppressed. Sealing the path to the nascent soul for northern reaches cultivators, suppressing us with a mountain, extracting our spiritual energy to bolster the southern domain. I won't allow it. The 5 peak Tao-seeking experts from the northern reaches, including the imperial bloodline clan chief, were in a rage. However, they were no match for Meng Hao, now that he had produced a Dharma idol and was half a step into true immortality. The peak of Tao-seeking was simply no match for him, not even when they joined forces like they had earlier. Roaring, the 5 transformed into prismatic beams of light as they attempted to flee. In this war, the northern reaches had been defeated, completely and utterly defeated. However, as long as the 5 of them remained alive, there was always the possibility that they could turn things around in the future. Therefore, they fled at top speed, each one heading in a different direction. Meng Hao floated in midair, calmly looking on. He waved his hand, and the 9th mountain rumbled, shooting forward to appear directly in front of the obese woman. The woman was moving with indescribable speed. However, as soon as the 9th mountain appeared, her body sank down and her nascent divinity flew out amidst the shattering air. She let out a miserable scream, and a boom rang out as the 9th mountain completely suppressed her, sealing her nascent divinity inside. Then the mountain flickered again, reappearing off in the distance, where it began to suppress the old man who had looked like a hopping vampire. His cultivation base was the weakest of them all, and his nascent divinity had a look of despair on its face. He tried to attack madly, but was completely incapable of doing anything to the mountain. Rumbling could be heard as he was sealed inside. After that, the mountain flickered again, to appear in front of the effeminate man. His body was covered with glittering magical symbols that made him look almost like a moon. Seeing that he would be incapable of escaping, a ruthless gleam appeared in his eyes, and he chose to self-detonate. He would rather die than be suppressed. However, before he even had time to self-detonate, the rumbling 9th mountain sealed his nascent divinity inside, filling the effeminate man's eyes with despair. After quickly sealing those 3 people in succession, the 9th mountain's spiritual energy was incredibly strong. A droning sound filled the air as it moved once again, causing winds to stir and the air to distort. It was now in front of the old man who looked like a demon devil. He struggled, but it only made the situation worse. He was suppressed and absorbed into the mountain. Finally, the mountain vanished for the final time to appear in front of the northern reaches' most powerful expert, the imperial bloodline clan chief. The man's face was ashen, and he began to laugh bitterly. Turning his head to Meng Hao, he said, "We will replenish the spiritual energy of the southern domain, but you have to give the northern reaches a time limit. Then I will help you." 10,000 years, said Meng Hao, his voice neutral. 10,000 years. The old man laughed bitterly, but ceased his struggling and allowed the ninth mountain to suppress and seal him. After suppressing 5 powerful experts, the mountain was now bursting with spiritual energy. It looked like a spirit mountain as it slowly descended to the lands below. When it touched down, it would fuse with the southern domain, using the spiritual energy from the 5 peak Tao-seeking cultivation bases to nourish the land. These 5 people were now like 5 spirit stones. Their spiritual energy would be slowly sucked away until the southern domain's spiritual energy once again flourished like it used to. Then all of a sudden, a faint sigh echoed through the land. At the same time, a woman appeared, coming from the direction of the Milky Way Sea. She wore a blue gown which spread out to cover everything beneath her, almost like a stretch of sky. She floated toward the battlefield from off in the distance, a swath of blue drifting between heaven and earth. Caption ID equals attachment / 68616. Align equals align center. Width equals 580. Official ISSTH Art of the Dawn Immortal. Note the resurrection lily in the background / caption. As soon as she appeared, the natural law in the world faded. Even time seemed to come to a standstill. The ninth mountain hovered there in midair, incapable of touching down. As for the cultivators on the battlefield, they stood there trembling. Even the Tao-seeking experts could do nothing but stop in place. Everything was motionless. The woman was the only one who was moving. She strode through the air up toward Meng Hao. He once said, "When the vortex eye appears, the lotus transformation will be seen. In the gap between immortal and devil, the blue lotus will appear." And now, the woman's voice was faint but profound as it echoed out through heaven and earth. Behind her, a faint image appeared, that of a blue lotus. It was a Dharma idol. Under the gaze of the countless stars, the blood of 1,000,000 cultivators flows and the vortex eye appears. The western desert apocalypse created the boundless violet sea, within which was concealed the transformations of the lotus. The day has arrived in which the heavens are numbed and filled with grieving ghosts. Now my blue lotus can appear. The only thing I am missing is the gap between immortal and devil. The mist blade descended, you severed the devil and sought the Tao, and thus the gap between immortal and devil appeared. The woman's gaze seemed somewhat distant. At first glance, her eyes looked calm, at second glance, insane, and at a third glance, profound. It was as if her gaze contained countless cycles of reincarnation. I will use the blood of millions as mud, the countless aggrieved ghosts as muddy stains. I will emerge unstained from the blood-soaked mud without a blemish upon me. I will shed the resurrection lily and become a blue lotus. I sought the Tao on the day the heavens were numbed. By dawn, I had already reached immortal ascension. I severed my goodness and cut away my root of immortality. Only when my evil reached the pinnacle could I risk everything to make a transformation. She strolled forward and came to stop 300 meters in front of Meng Hao. I've been making preparations for a long time. Now that the gap between immortal and devil has appeared, I can assimilate you and then be complete. I scattered countless roots years ago, so the gap between immortal and devil was bound to appear eventually. Originally, I wouldn't have selected you, but you became part of the League of Demon Sealers. It seems you were fated by karma. Now, I must thank you. With that, she gave him a curtsying bow. Meng Hao didn't respond at first. The pausing of the natural law of heaven and earth and of time was all due to this woman. However, cracking sounds suddenly rang out around Meng Hao like something shattering. In the blink of an eye, he was restored to normal. The Dharma idol behind him began to shine with resplendent light. "Mother of the resurrection lily," he said, "dawn immortal." The woman nodded, and a faint smile could be seen on her face. It was a beautiful smile that contained reminiscence. As she studied Meng Hao, she suddenly looked a bit distracted. "You don't look like him, but your aura is the same," she said softly. "From ancient times until now, the League of Demon Sealers has been cold and heartless. I'll assimilate you and become a blue lotus. Karma will be fulfilled. What was sown that year will be reaped this year. From now on, I owe him nothing, and he owes me nothing." She stretched out her hand and pointed toward Meng Hao. Immediately, everything seemed to change. The world filled with shocking, illusory waves of seawater that swept toward Meng Hao from all directions, as if preparing to inundate him. It was at this point that the Dharma idol behind him suddenly opened its mouth and roared. It was one roar, but it caused everything to shatter. Cracking sounds echoed out, and the waves collapsed. The seawater vanished as if it had evaporated, transforming into endless dark clouds up above. "Back in the Reliance sect," said Meng Hao coolly, "you were lurking in the shadows. When I was in the Milky Way Sea, you were there hiding. You even showed your face at the battle of the Blood Demon Sect. And yet again, here you are in this territorial war. I don't care about your motive for all of this. You want to assimilate me. Unfortunately, you're not qualified. His Dharma idol's eyes glittered. It then took a step forward and lifted its hands up. The blood demon grand magic appeared, an enormous vortex which shot toward the woman. If you looked closely, you would see that the blood demon grand magic was similar to the vortex up in the sky. As it rotated, the clouds up above swirled and also surged toward the woman. When the resurrection lily blooms with 7 colors, the woman said softly, the petals fall, immortality in 1,000 years. She looked at the incoming vortex, then waved her finger. Shockingly, a 7-colored resurrection lily appeared in front of her. Instantly, it shattered, forming 7 multicolored wisps that floated through the air like dandelion seeds as they collided with the blood demon grand magic vortex. A shocking boom rang out. As the 7 multicolored wisps passed through the vortex, they trembled slightly. They might have seemed weak, but they didn't pause at all, transforming into beams of multicolored light that shot directly toward Meng Hao. As they neared him, they became 7 flower petals that resembled magical sealing marks. Meng Hao's eyes flashed with coldness. His Dharma idol roared, causing the surroundings to distort and the 7 petals to stop in place. It was at this moment that he raised his right hand, in which the copper mirror appeared. A glittering light could be seen within the copper mirror. If you looked closely, you would be able to make out demon weapon Lolnatum. When Meng Hao merged the demon weapon into the copper mirror, he had been unable to use it. Only after entering Dao Seeking, gaining immortal qi, and learning to summon a Dharma idol was he finally able to sense Lolnatum inside. He pushed down onto the copper mirror and grabbed, and a huge roar filled the air. A gust of demonic qi surged out, filling the air. It was at this point that a long, red spear appeared in his hands. It was both red and white, the colors intertwined in a way that made it impossible to describe with any word other than demonic. With Lolnatum in hand, Meng Hao didn't hesitate for even a moment. He immediately struck out toward the 7 petals. The spear shot through the air and everything rumbled. Demonic qi surged out, sweeping across everything. As demon weapon Lolnatum surged through the air, shockingly, a tombstone suddenly appeared in front of Meng Hao. The tombstone instantly suppressed everything in the area. BOOMMM. The 7 flower petals were destroyed, exploding into 7 colored motes of light that spread out into the air. In this moment, Meng Hao stood there, holding demon weapon Lolnatum in hand, and he looked like a paragon of heaven and earth, undefeatable. The woman's expression was the same as ever, as if she didn't care at all about Meng Hao's grandiose aura. In fact, a look of pity appeared on her face. You are of the League of Demon Sealers, so I won't lie to you. Nobody can save you. This planet's branch of the Jai clan owes me a favor, and they won't do anything to stop me. Other than them, there are a few ancient beings on this planet, but none of them will do anything to obstruct my way either. Today, nobody can save you. The time has come for you to be assimilated. As she spoke, she began to glow with boundless light. Behind her, the blue lotus began to sway and emit an indescribable crushing pressure. For the first time, Meng Hao's facial expression flickered. Neither he nor his Dharma idol were capable of moving even the slightest bit. Furthermore, it even appeared as if a blue lotus was about to sprout out of his body. At this exact moment, a cold snort echoed out like thunder, shattering the air as it rolled across the land. I dare you to touch him, just try it. This chapter was sponsored by Ahmed Tawfiq Ahmed Fuad, Panav Roman, Isaac Martis, Cedric Serre, Leonardo Sampio, Tanwat Pichibunwang, David Obando, Deng Quang Tran, Jose Acosta Comas, Anan, Juan Hernandez, and Nyoman Anga Edwidia Kirana. Chapter 797, Reuniting. I should have killed you the last time we met in the Milky Way Sea, slut. This second voice was that of a woman. The 2 voices instantly shattered the pause which had caused everything to cease moving. The 9th mountain continued to descend, and all the cultivators could move again. Even as the cold snort continued to echo about, a sword beam shot through the air to completely sever the invisible connection between the Dawn Immortal and Meng Hao. Booming echoed out, and a tremor ran through Meng Hao. The blue lotus vanished, and his Dharma idol was restored. His eyes went wide as he saw 2 figures approaching from the distance. It was a man and a woman, and when Meng Hao could see them clearly, his mind filled with thunderous roaring. He knew those faces well. Even if tens of millions of years passed, he would never be able to forget them. The woman was his mother, who had held him in her arms as a child and told him stories. The man was his father, who seemed strict, but whose eyes were filled with boundless fatherly love. Caption ID equals attachment backslash 68636. Align equals align center. Width equals 500. Official ISSDH art of Fang Ziyufeng. Meng Hao's father slash caption. Caption ID equals attachment backslash 68637. Align equals align center. Width equals 580. Official ISSDH art of Meng Li. Meng Hao's mother slash caption. Caption ID equals attachment backslash 68639. Align equals align center. Width equals 400. Cute version of Fang Ziyufeng slash caption caption. ID equals attachment backslash 68638. Align equals align center. Width equals 400. Cute version of Meng Lai slash caption. Meng Hao began to tremble and could do nothing more than stare blankly. At the same time, the mark on his hand began to shine brightly. As soon as the man and woman appeared, the Dawn Immortal's face flickered. She began to pant, and her expression was one of complete disbelief as she backed up. She had only retreated by 3 measures when the man's gaze locked onto her. A rumbling sound echoed out, and then blood sprayed from the Dawn Immortal's mouth. A look of astonishment covered her face. It was at this point that the Dharma idol behind her exploded into countless pieces. Furthermore, the enormous resurrection lily on the Milky Way Sea, which was the Dawn Immortal's true body, also exploded, shattering into countless pieces. The resurrection lily was completely defeated. One look from him shattered my Dharma idol, thought the Dawn Immortal, her face pale. It even seriously injured me. What just severed my blue lotus bridge just now was not a sword, it was his gaze. Who is he? His level of power is unimaginable. Even the Jai clan can't begin to compare. Her foundation had been destroyed, and now she didn't dare back up any further. In the face of an almighty being like this, whether she lived or died wasn't up to her. Before I came to this planet, the man said coolly, standing between Meng Hao and the Dawn Immortal, an old friend revealed to me that there was a flower here within the ocean, left behind by his benefactor. The flower had long since become a demon that had existed for countless years. It had experienced nirvanic rebirth numerous times, and was not willing to truly ascend to immortality. You must be the flower he spoke of. You clearly could have achieved true immortal ascension long ago, and made your way out into the starry sky. Why have you made things hard on yourself and on others? Well, considering your existence has provided some benefit to my son through all his tempering, I won't slay you this day. Go break through to immortal ascension already. The sky and land trembled as if struck by countless peals of thunder. When this man spoke, natural law conformed to his words. The Dawn Immortal's face went pale, and more blood sprayed from her mouth as she fell back a full 3,000 meters. Finally, she looked up and smiled a heartrending smile. The woman standing next to the man suddenly spoke up. Why waste your words on her? Just sever her head. Meng Hao stood behind the two of them, his mind spinning with disbelief. His heart was in complete chaos, and he had no idea what to say. Sever me? The Dawn Immortal laughed bitterly. Her face twisted savagely and her hair was thrown into disarray. She had lost her foundation, the actual resurrection lily. Her Dharma idol had been destroyed, and yet a look of madness could be seen in her eyes. The League of Demon Sealers are all a heartless bunch. I kept that man company, but he severed me in the end. My heart beats with hatred. I was born in ancient times, and yes, I could have achieved immortal ascension on many occasions throughout the years. The only reason I never left this place is because of what he told me back then. He severed me here and then left on his own. I killed countless members of his bloodline, but my hatred remains. And now you want to sever me too? She lifted her head up and laughed. Then she flung her arms out wide. I have existed in the lands of South Heaven since ancient times. I may have stayed hidden and out of sight, but now I call on all of the people who owe favors to me, the Dawn Immortal, all of you. Help me assimilate this child. Help me achieve my desire. Abide by your promises from the past. Her shrill voice echoed out throughout all the lands of South Heaven. As it did, a soft sigh echoed out from within the ancient Tao lakes, seeming to contain helplessness, and at the same time shocking power. I should not emerge. According to the treaty from back then, I cannot emerge, and yet this favor must be paid back. A gold-violet beast suddenly appeared from within the ancient Tao lakes. At the same time, Dust began to fall off one of the statues inside the ancient Temple of Doom. The statue's eyes opened. At first, they looked confused, but then an archaic light began to shine out, and the statue slowly rose to its feet. It was she who enabled me to go into hiding in this ancient temple and acquire that Joss Styx power. If I don't emerge, I can't rest my heart at ease. Far beneath the surface of the Milky Way Sea, an emaciated figure suddenly clawed its way out from within the mud and silt. The favor from years ago will be repaid today. However, before that happens, I must consume more blood. In the vast western desert, because of the draining of the Violet Sea into the Milky Way Sea, its water level had been greatly reduced. Not far beneath the surface was a mountain that at first seemed completely ordinary, but then it began to shake, and suddenly a face appeared on it. This mountain began to rise up. It was no mountain, but rather an enormous giant. It looked like a mountain deity as its head broke through the surface of the water. Its expression was archaic as it flew up into the air. Slaughter, to repay my debt, I shall slaughter 1,000,000 cultivators. Also underneath the Violet Sea was a mountain range called the Black Dragon Mountains. It began to tremble, sending numerous boulders tumbling down its sides. Shockingly, an enormous crocodile appeared. It swished its tail as it shot out of the water, causing everything to shake. A brutal gleam could be seen in the crocodile's eyes, and it did not speak. However, its unbridled ferocity exploded with intensity. In the northern reaches, in the lands of a minor tribe, was an altar upon which rested a skull that had remained in that position year in and year out. It was impossible to tell how long it had been there. At this moment, a dim light began to shine from the skull, and it flew into the air. Also in the northern reaches was a valley that was sealed over with ice. It was a forbidden zone for cultivators, and deep in its depths was a chunk of ice. Sealed inside of the ice was a man who had golden wings growing out of his back. The man's eyes snapped open, and cracking sounds could be heard as the ice shattered. He stepped out, frowned, then gave a light sigh. Back when I arrived, I was seriously injured and was on the verge of death. She kept me alive and made me promise to pay her back. In the vast eastern lands were two forbidden zones. One was the ancient paradise. Rumor had it that the entire place was filled with countless ancient medicinal plants, each one of which emanated strong auras of death. That was because the ancient paradise was actually an ancient battlefield. Within the ancient paradise was an enormous withered tree whose roots spread throughout the ground. The tree trembled in response to the dawn immortal's call, and its roots retracted into its body. When that happened, the tree surged with shocking energy. There was another forbidden zone in the eastern lands, which some people called the Immortality Temple. It was located in a sprawling mountain range and was filled with innumerable restrictive spells. Deep in the mountains was an ancient, dilapidated temple. The statue of whatever divinity the temple had been erected to had long since crumbled and was impossible to see clearly. However, inside was an oil lamp which had not been lit for uncountable years. At this moment, that oil lamp blazed with fire and began to pulse with a divine light. The light covered the entire ancient temple as well as the statue of the divinity. Suddenly, a figure appeared, who then sighed. Well, she came from here and is connected to me. It separated from the image of the divinity, floated up out of the ancient temple, then flew off into the distance. A total of 9 auras surged out, causing rumbling to spread throughout all the lands of South Heaven. The sky turned dark, and the living creatures in the land trembled. All of the cultivators on the battlefield appeared to be on the verge of losing consciousness. The great sects of the eastern lands were completely astonished, and their patriarchs began to think about the various legends recorded in their ancient records. In the Jade clan of the eastern lands, the armless young patriarch stood up, and a strange light gleamed in his eyes. The Dawn Immortal is incredible. Even I could never have imagined that she would have set up so many contingencies. And it's no wonder. She has existed for countless years. If she had focused solely on cultivation, it would be impossible to even speculate what realm she would be in. As the lands of South Heaven trembled, the husband and wife stood there in front of Meng Hao. The woman's face flickered as she looked around, then she stepped back to stand next to Meng Hao. Meng Hao's mind was still spinning, and as he looked at her face, he felt like he was in a trance. "Are you really my mom?" he murmured. "Hey, she responded. "You've suffered many hardships throughout the years." This woman was none other than Meng Hao's mother. When she looked at him, her heart stabbed with pain. She reached out to clasp his hand, her eyes filled with both love and tears. "It's all my fault," she said. I'm a bad mother for not being able to take care of you. You were so young back then. When Daddy and I left, you ran out of the house crying and yelling. I saw you fall down and my heart broke. 1. Meng Hao had a vision of when his parents left him, way back in chapter 653. It was at this point that the man turned back to look at Meng Hao. It was a gaze that caused Meng Hao's mind to tremble. It was filled with love and kindness, and it instantly caused tears to begin to stream down Meng Hao's face. He never imagined that he would cry at a moment like this, nor that he would reunite so quickly with his father and mother. He wasn't sure what to say, but he couldn't stop the tears from streaming down. His mother saw Meng Hao weeping, which caused more tears to flow down her own face. "Hey R," she said, and then embraced him warmly, which made Meng Hao think about the times when he was a boy and how he hated leaving her side. "Don't cry," said his father, tousling his hair. He was smiling, and the love in his eyes grew even stronger. "You're grown up now," he said calmly. "You're already half a step into true immortality, so it's time that I pass on some Taoist magic to you. My Tao is the Tao of the sword. Watch carefully, I'm going to show you 9 sword forms." First form, he extended his left leg and bent it slightly. Then his body sprang into motion. He bent backward gracefully until he looked almost like a taut bow, completely at one with heaven and earth. In the next breath, it seemed as if heaven and earth were wholly incompatible with him, yet helpless to do anything. It was as if he had drawn an incredible burst of power down from the heavens. He extended his right hand, within which appeared an ordinary iron sword. 1. We have seen this iron sword before, in chapter 782. The sword swept toward the southern domain's ancient Tao lakes. This chapter was sponsored by Seth Karaman. /expand. 3,000 great Taos, the man said softly. They each have their powerful and extraordinary aspects. In fact, it's impossible to say which is the most powerful. The Tao exists in the heart, and the heart is born of the will. If your will is strong, then your Tao will be powerful and your sword will be invincible. Pay attention to my movements. There are 9 in total, and each one can stir up the power of the stars. The iron sword descended. The sky and land shook, and all the light in the world seemed to vanish. The only thing left behind was the sword beam. Everything grew faded and blurry. The only thing remaining was the iron sword. The sword beam surged and the iron sword descended. It appeared above the ancient Tao lakes, directly in front of the flying beast that had just emerged. The beast stared in shock at the sword beam, its face falling completely. It let out a miserable shriek, thoroughly astonished, and raced backward in an attempt to get back into the ancient Tao lakes. This. Even as the beast retreated, the sword beam closed in. At the same time, the ancient Tao lakes erupted, and an archaic voice echoed out. "Your Excellency, please calm your anger. I beg of you to show mercy to this clan member of mine." "Request denied," growled a voice, and explosive pressure filled the air above the ancient Tao lakes. The sword beam swept through the air, and the beast let out a blood-curdling scream. Its body exploded into burning chunks as it was destroyed in body and spirit. One sword blow blotted it out of existence. Everything rumbled as one out of the 9 auras which had appeared was wiped away. The remaining 8 auras froze in midair, and their faces filled with astonishment. After only a moment, they hurriedly retreated. Unfortunately for them, it was too late. "Hayar," said Meng Hao's father, "look carefully at the second sword form. Always remember that when you attack with a sword, your mind must be empty, free of all distraction. You are the Tao, and the Tao is the sword." Shockingly, what he was passing on was the most powerful Tao he had ever mastered in his life. A Tao could not be passed down lightly. However, this was his son. Considering that he had agreed to stand guard over South Heaven for 100,000 years for Meng Hao, there was no need to wonder whether he would pass down a Tao. Even as he spoke the words, he stepped forward with his right foot. The move was made so quickly that it kicked up a fierce wind. The second sword beam exploded out. The sky vibrated under the terrifying power. It almost seemed like all the man had to do was exercise a thought, and the heavens could be slashed apart. Rumbling could be heard as the sword beam appeared above the southern domain's ancient Temple of Doom. The image of the statue was terrified, already fleeing at top speed. However, before it could enter the temple, the sword beam slashed through the air. A blood-curdling scream rang out as an almighty being was beheaded, his body raging with fire as he was completely destroyed. The only thing that remained was the lingering cry of death. "Above the spirit realm is the immortal realm," said Meng Hao's father. "Right now, you are half a step into true immortality, which means you are in the space between the spirit realm and the immortal realm. When you complete that step, you will enter the immortal realm. Now pay attention to the third sword form. Breathing steadily, he caressed the blade of the sword with his left hand, almost as if he were awakening its spirit. In this third sword form, the blade was stabbed down into the ground, causing the entire land to shake. The sword beam appeared beneath the Milky Way Sea, behind the withered figure there that was fleeing at top speed. "Who are you? Don't kill me, I surrender. I can be your son's Tao protector." Back in the southern domain, Meng Hao's father looked back at him. "Hey, or do you want him?" Meng Hao stared in shock, and then subconsciously shook his head. His father laughed. "Tao protector, you're not worthy to play such a role for my son." As his voice echoed out, the sword descended. Rumbling filled the withered figure as his body collapsed into pieces which burned into nothingness. 3 sword forms had slaughtered 3 almighty beings. When the patriarchs of the ancient sects in the eastern lands saw what was happening, they rose to their feet and began to tremble with terror. As they observed, they began to surmise what exactly was happening. In the Jai clan, the armless young patriarch sighed. "If you people hadn't showed your faces, none of this would have happened. He wouldn't have gone to make trouble for you. At any other time, it wouldn't have mattered. Considering his temperament, he really wouldn't have paid you any attention. But now, you had to go and mess with his son." Messing with his son is like rubbing a cat's fur backward. Who would dare to do such a thing? The remaining 6 auras were trembling violently. How could they ever have imagined that the Dawn Immortal would actually provoke someone this terrifying? Of these 6 auras, 2 ceased falling back and instead shot high up into the sky, as if to flee the planet itself. One was the skull, the other was the mountain deity from the western desert's violet sea. On the path of cultivation, one cannot rely on the protection of others. You haven't left planet South Heaven yet in this lifetime. Let me tell you, I've seen far too many chosen who utilize the help of Tao protectors. By now, each and every one is as useless as a wild chicken or a stray dog. Meng Hao's father turned to him and chuckled, then performed an incantation with his left hand, extending his index finger and middle finger together. It almost seemed as if he were wresting away energy from heaven and earth, causing a bizarre glow to surround his entire body as he took 2 more steps forward. With each step, a blast of sword chi shot up into the sky. A moment later, the mountain deity let out a miserable shriek. Its enormous frame was clearly about to escape planet South Heaven. Nonetheless, it collapsed into pieces, which then burned into nothing. As for the skull, it shot out into the starry sky and was speeding away. Unfortunately for it, even with such speed, it could not outrun the sword chi. "No," screamed the skull. Then it was completely destroyed, including its nascent divinity. Meng Hao's eyes widened, and he stared blankly at his father. He had taken 5 steps, unleashing one sword after another, slaughtering 5 terrifying beings as easily as if he were killing baby chickens. Those almighty creatures, auras were such that any single one would leave Meng Hao dazed. Any of them could have slaughtered him easily. And yet, a single beam of sword chi from his father, and they were completely eradicated. What realm are they in?" Meng Hao murmured. The first to reply was his mother. "They have opened their immortal meridians, solidified their Tao fruit, and stepped into the peak of the immortal realm. They refer to themselves as Tao lords but are unable to open the door to the ancient realm. They aren't even true immortals and will one day return to the dust." "In the spirit realm, Tao seeking is the absolute peak," said Meng Hao's father. "In the immortal realm, there are 2 paths. The first path involves offering worship to an ancestor, acquiring that ancestor's Tao fruit, and then using it to tread the path to immortality. On that path, you will never have a Dharma idol of your own. Immortals like that are referred to as false immortals. That is because, if that ancestor ever perishes, everyone who worships him will experience a drop in their cultivation base. That is the easy path to immortality, the one which the vast majority of people choose to follow. However, there is another path. On that path, you worship yourself. Your Dharma idol is your own. You experience immortal tribulation and tread your own path. Others can worship you and tread your path of cultivation as false immortals. This second path is the path of the true immortal." Meng Hao's father moved like the wind as he took 2 more steps forward. Each step caused the ground to quake. His hair swirled around him in the air, and wisps of mist rose up from the top of his head. He waved his right hand, causing 2 more beams of sword chi to fly out, one toward the eastern lands, the other toward the western desert. In the ancient paradise of the eastern lands, the tree's branches were rustling, and its aura surged. Its mind was unprecedentedly focused as it drew upon all the power it could muster. The entire ancient paradise began to vibrate. The ground split, and the tree's roots writhed as it prepared to fight back against the incoming sword chi. A boom rang out, and the tree wailed. All the power it could muster did nothing to stop the incoming sword chi. The tree was split completely in half, and then began to burn. Screams of pain filled the air as the tree was transformed into ash. Beneath the surface of the violet sea in the western desert, the crocodile was trembling. It fled with all the speed it could muster, but the sword chi descended upon it nonetheless. In the blink of an eye, it was right above its head. The crocodile wore a look of hopelessness. I can be a mount, the crocodile cried out. I don't qualify to be a Tao protector, but I'm willing to be a mount. When it cried out, the sword chi suddenly came to a stop in midair. It swirled around, transforming into a sealing mark which fused onto the crocodile's body. You possess some of the bloodline of a scaly dragon. Thus, you are qualified to be a mount for my Hayar. The crocodile trembled, and its mind was completely occupied by terror and fear. After being sealed, its body shrank down until it was only about 3 meters long. Then it was pulled back rapidly until it appeared in front of Meng Hao. The crocodile knew that it was dealing with a little patriarch, so it immediately put on an ingratiating air and swished its tail back and forth. Meng Hao looked at the crocodile, an awkward expression on his face. Unfortunately, said Meng Hao's father, shaking his head, you've only opened 53 meridians. If you could open at least 60 or more, then you could summon the power of the scaly dragon's bloodline. Hayar, in the immortal realm, there are no stages. There are only the 100 meridians of the Tao of immortality. All living creatures have 100 meridians, that is a constant. No living thing has more or less. Once you enter the immortal realm, you will cultivate those 100 meridians. The soul is grouped into 3 spiritual aspects and 7 physical aspects, a total of 10 vessels. The meridians are organized into groups of 10, each of which form a vessel. If all 100 meridians are opened, you have achieved the immortal soul and will produce your own unique Tao fruit, whereupon you can open the door to the ancient realm. 1. Considering Meng Hao's father's explanation of the physical and spiritual aspects of souls, it now becomes more clear why the Wang clan patriarch was said to be incapable of truly reaching immortal ascension, as described in chapter 682, and especially 683. Unfortunately, success in the immortal realm is not so easy. From ancient times until now, someone with 50 open meridians would be considered to be at the peak of the immortal realm, and could attempt to open the ancient door. According to legend, it is as easy to find someone with 80 open meridians as it is to find a phoenix feather or a killing horn. Only chosen who are direct descendants of various great sects and clans would have a chance to do so. 90 opened meridians is something even rarer and exists only in legends. As for the full 100 meridians, from ancient times until now, no one has ever done it. But you can, Hayar, said his mother immediately. His father laughed, then suddenly crouched slightly, then straightened up, his posture like a giant holding up the weight of the world. He took 2 steps forward and waved his arms, causing 2 beams of sword chi to shoot out, one toward the eastern lands, the other toward the northern reaches. Considering the level of his cultivation base, he didn't actually need such meticulous movements. He normally moved as fluidly as clouds or flowing water. However, for Meng Hao's sake, he was demonstrating all of the movements in detail. In the frozen valley in the northern reaches, the man who had walked out from the ice earlier was now laughing bitterly. He didn't make any move to evade, but rather sat there cross-legged, chuckling, his eyes shining with a light of madness. Suddenly, his skin turned purple, and the power of a curse began to circulate around him as the sword chi bore down. Anyone who kills me will have their bloodline cursed, he cried, and the wings on his back suddenly opened wide. A cold snort echoed out. Someone from a measly species of curse users. Your bloodline isn't pure, and yet you dare to try to curse the House of Fang. The sword chi descended, slashing directly into the winged man's head. Flames burst out, dissolving the curse power. It never even had a chance to be unleashed before it was dissipated completely. Chapter 798, Father Makes a Laughingstock of South Heaven. This chapter was sponsored by Fabian Mueller. Chapter 799, Born on East Victory. Final blast of sword chi shot through the ground toward the deep mountains of the eastern lands and the ancient temple. An intense, glowing light rose up from the temple, along with the music of a great Tao. It seemed as if countless immortal divinities were sitting cross-legged inside the temple. The mountain itself, as well as everything surrounding it, seemed to be part of a Taoist rites temple. It was even possible to see that crowds of chosen had practiced cultivation there throughout the years. "Oh," exclaimed Meng Hao's father, the sword Qi came to a stop. The door of the ancient temple opened up, and a figure emerged. It was impossible to see the figure clearly, but it stood there facing Meng Hao's father. "I didn't realize that there was an immortal ancient Taoist rite temple here. How rude of me. Well, since this location has been activated, hand over the immortal ancient Taoist medallion." The figure was silent for a moment, then waved a hand. The ancient temple rumbled, and out flew a command medallion that pulsed with immortal qi. The bright light emanating from the temple faded, and the figure vanished. 9 powerful experts had appeared. One after the other perished. The crocodile became a mount, and the figure from the immortal temple offered up an immortal ancient Taoist medallion to prevent any trouble. The other 7 were all slain. It all happened incredibly quickly. By the time Meng Hao's father finished speaking a few words to Meng Hao, everything was over. The cultivators on the ground in South Domain were astonished. The peak Tao-seeking experts in midair were completely shaken. The Dawn Immortal laughed bitterly and staggered back a few paces. Blood oozed out of her mouth as she looked at Meng Hao and shook her head. "Fate, how cruel you are," she said. "I wanted to become a blue lotus, not for the sake of true immortality but because he said, once upon a time, that he loved lotuses." The Dawn Immortal chuckled sadly and backed up further. Her body seemed to be starting to dissipate. She had lost her foundation, and since she couldn't assimilate Meng Hao and become a blue lotus, the only thing left for her to do now was fade away. "Meng Hao," she murmured, "you are of the League of Demon Sealers. From ancient times they have always been cruel and heartless. One day, if you ever encounter one of them who mentions resurrection lilies, I'd like you to ask him something for me. Ask him if he remembers a flower back in the lands of South Heaven, a resurrection lily whom he severed away." She looked up into the sky and tears glistened down her cheeks as she began to fade away. "I am filled with hatred, but what I hate is not you. I hate myself for not being a blue lotus." Her soft voice echoed out across the lands before fading away. Meng Hao's mind trembled as he watched the Dawn Immortal vanish into nothing. The war between the southern domain and the northern reaches was over. The western desert left, their towering south-cleaving sentinels leading the way. The southern domain would never forget the kindness shown to them by the western desert. It would be engraved in their memories for generation after generation to come. As for the sinners from the northern reaches, they had lost their path back home and become felon citizens. There were now only 100,000 cultivators in the southern domain. Many sects and clans had been completely wiped out, and numerous core Taoist teachings and doctrines had vanished. Even the spiritual energy in the land was sparse. Thankfully, the mountain Meng Hao had created continued to infuse the land with spiritual energy. Perhaps many years later, the southern domain would once again shine with its former glory. Pill Demon went back to the Violet Fate sect, and Patriarch Song to the Song clan. If you didn't count Meng Hao, they were the 2 remaining peak Tao-seeking experts in the southern domain. Furthermore, the Violet Fate sect and the Song clan were now like holy lands within the southern domain. In the days to come, they would lead the southern domain cultivators to rebuild their sects and clans, and select appropriate people from the mortal populace to begin practicing cultivation. Slowly, the southern domain would be restored. What was needed was time, at the very least, hundreds or perhaps thousands of years. The mountain in which the 5 peak Tao-seeking northern reaches cultivators was sealed, the one named Sin of the North, stood tall above the lands. As time passed, it would become a famous landmark in the southern domain. The war was over. During that war, Meng Hao had risen to complete prominence. His name was famous in the southern domain and the western desert. It had even shaken the eastern lands. Meng Hao had become the focus of attention of all the lands of South Heaven. As for all the chosen of his own generation, some were dead and some had faded into obscurity. None of them were able to keep up with Meng Hao, let alone surpass him. The cultivators of the southern domain, Meng Hao's stories were the stuff of legend. He had started out in the Reliance sect, acquired the Blood Immortal legacy, thrown the southern domain into chaos, and shocked everyone at the Song clan. Then, in the Violet Fate sect, he had rocked the entire southern domain again under the name of Pill Cauldron. At the Rebirth Cave, he had slain one of the sons of Jai, a Quasi-Ray member. In the Black Lands, he had participated in the siege of Holy Snow City. In the Western Desert, he had led his tiny tribe through the Violet Rain apocalypse. Because of him, They rose to glory one step at a time until he finally brought them to the Black Lands. Then he had vanished, only to reappear years later, fighting the spirit-severing expert patriarch Huyan in a shocking battle that had astonished the Western Desert and Black Lands alike. Then, he had left everyone reeling in shock as he went to the demon immortal sect. The chosen of the southern domain had congregated in the demon immortal sect, but couldn't do anything to Meng Hao even after joining forces. After wresting away virtually all their good fortune, Meng Hao had next appeared in the Milky Way Sea. The 10th Wang clan patriarch had appeared in person, and Meng Hao narrowly avoided death. His perfect Tao foundation was stolen, and just when he was about to truly die, Su Qing saved him, proving that they were destined to be bound in marriage. After he awoke in the rebirth cave, he battled the Black Civ sect, then shockingly descended into bedevilment. At the ancient Tao Lakes, he had snatched the soul of a true immortal. 4 powers of the southern domain had allied against the blood demon sect in a shocking war. Then, on the day of his grand wedding, the northern reaches invaded. Su Qing died, and Meng Hao went mad. Fight, fight, fight. Kill, kill, kill. Finally, he severed the devil and sought the Tao, stepping halfway into true immortality. Meng Hao's story swept through the southern domain like storm winds. The western desert heard the tales, as did the shocked northern reaches. Even the eastern lands caught wind. Meng Hao's name had truly risen to prominence. //. Currently, Meng Hao sat in Blood Prince Gorge in the Blood Demon sect. His father and mother sat in front of him. Meng Hao was no longer shaken like he had been before. Instead, he sat there quietly, even taciturn. Hundreds of years had passed, and he had finally reunited with his parents. Although the memories from when he was 7 years old had not been erased, they were somewhat foggy. However, the affection he felt because of the blood connection with his parents made things even more complicated. There were so many things he didn't understand, too many perplexing conundrums. Why did his father and mother leave that year? Why had they suddenly reappeared now? Where had they been this whole time? Where were they when he was experiencing grave crises? Where were they when the resurrection lily infected him? Where were they when the Wang clan patriarch stole his perfect Tao foundation? Where were they when he nearly died in the rebirth cave? Where were they when Su Qing died? If they were merely mortals, it wouldn't matter, but they had just casually slain 9 incredibly powerful experts in a single short battle. Meng Hao now knew that his father and mother were powerful, so powerful in fact, that the Jai clan hadn't appeared during the entire affair. He needed an answer, he needed an explanation. His heart felt twisted into a knot. "Hey R," began his mother, tears streaming down her face. "You don't need to worry about Su Qing. Your father placed a stream of divine sense on her. It will keep her safe during reincarnation and will guide her back to you." "I know what is gnawing at your mind," his father said. "You must have many questions." There was love in his eyes, and it was clearly strong. He stretched out his hand, and a brilliant glow appeared at the tip of his finger. "Allow me to take you into the past to awaken your memories. Then, you will see the explanation for yourself." The brilliant glow rose up and approached Meng Hao. Meng Hao looked at his father, and then looked at the brilliant glow. Finally, he closed his eyes. The bright glow fused into his forehead, then pulled him down into the deepest recesses of his memories. When he was born, there were 2 moons in the sky and countless stars. It was picturesque. He heard laughter ringing about in a magnificent temple. The temple was so enormous that it spread out across half of the entire planet it occupied. That entire area belonged to the Fang clan. "This boy will be a Qilin of the Fang clan." 1. This expression is used to describe a child that will bring good fortune and prosperity to the family. Throw a banquet that will last for 300 years. Invite all of the fellow Taoists from Planet East Victory. Wait, Planet East Victory isn't enough. My grandson's name will definitely shake the entire 9th mountain and sea. Invite the fellow Taoists from all the other 3 planets. Invite the ancient sects as well. This child is my daughter's son, which means that his future path of might will encompass the 8th mountain too. Invite everyone from the 8th mountain to come offer their congratulations. The voice rang out amongst endless cheerful laughter. When Meng Hao opened his eyes, these were the things he heard and saw. A woman was holding him in her arms. When he looked up at her, he saw his mother, though much younger. Standing next to her was a young girl of 5 or 6, looking at him with a curious, mischievous smile. Occasionally, she would take advantage of her mother's distraction to make faces at him. That was his older sister. Further off in the distance was his father, who looked very excited. He was surrounded by old men who were constantly toasting him. Meng Hao's birth caused a huge sensation throughout planet East Victory. The reason was that his father was a direct descendant of the Fang bloodline and also the eldest son. As for Meng Hao, he was also a direct descendant and the eldest grandson. Another reason was that Meng Hao's maternal grandfather was not from the Ninth Mountain. He was from the illustrious Meng clan of the Eighth Mountain. In fact, the lord of the Eighth Mountain was surnamed Meng. When Meng Hao was born, even the Jai clan sent congratulatory gifts, and Lord Jai sent a Dharma clone to visit. Meng Hao's birth rocked all four great planets, the entire Ninth Mountain, and all the ancient sects. Many understood that as long as this baby didn't turn out to be completely useless, then, given the power of the Fang and Meng clans, he would one day shine with blazing brilliance among the stars and seas. This was especially the case because the child had been born with a special mark on the back of his hand. It was a Nirvana brand. // Young lord, you can't go in there. That's a restricted area. You can't just barge in. Young lord, I beg of you, please don't bite that. Young lord, stop it, stop it. You can't dig holes there. The patriarch planted that tree there personally. Why you? That tree never did anything to you, don't dig it up. He was a 5-year-old boy who caused headaches for everyone in the Fang clan. He was simply far too naughty. Virtually every day, he ran around followed by a trail of fellow clan members. If someone wasn't keeping an eye on him at all times, havoc would be wrought. Little brother, you've been naughty again, said his older sister, cracking her knuckles and looking at him with narrowed eyes and a mischievous smile. She was a head taller than him, and the sight of her stomping toward him caused Meng Hao's scalp to go numb. He backed up, stammering, and was just about to try to make an explanation when the smackdown began. As his sister grew up, she continued to be very strict on him, to the point where Meng Hao's heart filled with fear at the thought of her and her violent personality. Chapter 800, Seventh Year Tribulation. Young lord, you need to study now. Young lord, stop bullying your cousin Prince Wei. Look, he's crying because you hit him. 1. The name of Prince Wei might make some readers recall something said by the Jai clan patriarch in Chapter 795. Aya, young lord, don't bully Princess Linger, she's your future beloved. The patriarch already issued the official order. Meng Hao gaped at everything that was happening. He watched the 5-year-old version of himself pummeling another boy his age. Apparently the boy had told on him, which earned Meng Hao beating from his sister. This was his revenge. In the end, the boy was in tears and begging for mercy. In another scene, he saw himself setting fire to the hair of a young girl who was about the same age as him. That left him feeling quite shocked. In fact, he couldn't help but think, this kid couldn't really be him, could he? He saw many unfamiliar faces, and he also witnessed the carefree life he had lived until he was 7 years of age. The life he had lived was one of simple happiness. He wasn't studious at all, which made Meng Hao recall how poorly he had fared in the imperial examinations. However, on his 7th birthday, everything changed. The day his 7th birthday arrived, something completely unforeseen happened to him. It was a misfortune, a shocking matter that caused a huge commotion throughout the entire Fang clan, although the news was quickly hushed up. The Fang clan had a bloodline legacy, a Taoist magic that was completely heaven-defying. It manifested differently among different clan members, depending on their bloodline. It was a Taoist magic that could allow for nirvanic rebirth up to 4 times. It was an ability that essentially gave them a chance to live up to 4 lifetimes. The character Fang Chinese letter is composed of 4 strokes, just like those 4 lifetimes too. Click here to see the 4 strokes of the character Fang. It was this Taoist magic that ensured that the Fang clan remained as a towering force in the Ninth Mountain and Sea, regardless of whether it was the era of Lord Li or Lord Jai. Any clan member who was born with a Nirvana brand was considered chosen. If a clan member was born without it, it was very difficult to develop it later in life. Furthermore, throughout all the years, it was virtually unheard of for anyone to actually live all 4 lifetimes. Even some of the clan patriarchs, when they became old and weak, could only experience nirvanic rebirth once. Those who had been able to experience nirvanic rebirth twice were extremely rare. It required a deep cultivation base, as well as a very pure Fang clan bloodline. Every time nirvanic rebirth was experienced, a nirvana flower would bloom. It would meld into the body and allow the subject to become incredibly powerful by living an entire additional lifetime. On Meng Hao's 7th birthday, he experienced nirvanic rebirth. He did not have a powerful cultivation base, and yet, he experienced nirvanic rebirth. This matter shook the whole Fang clan. Meng Hao's father and mother were even more astonished. That was because, although nirvanic rebirth was a good thing and enabled someone to live more lifetimes, for something like that to happen to a 7-year-old child was the most brutal of calamities. 3. This word for calamity is actually composed of two characters, Chinese letter. The first character is the same character, Hao Chinese letter from Meng Hao's name. The second is the character often translated tribulation Chinese letter. Together, they mean calamity. He hadn't even lived a life yet. He had a road of endless possibilities ahead of him, but was stifled before he could explore any of them. All the essence of his flesh and blood, all his fated good fortune yet to be revealed, was sucked into the nirvanic rebirth as he started over from the beginning. His body began to degenerate as he passed backward from 7 years of age until he was in the same state he had been when he was born. The Nirvana brand on the back of his hand faded some, and a layer of it fell off, which then transformed into a flower. Shockingly, the flower gave bloom to a fruit. That fruit gave rise to further shock in the Fang clan. Even the patriarchs who were locked away in secluded meditation came out to see. According to the legends, the pinnacle of the Fang clan's nirvanic rebirth Taoist magic was none other than the Nirvana fruit. Nirvana flowers were rare, but there were people in every generation who produced them. However, for many years in the Fang clan, the Nirvana fruit had only been spoken of as the stuff of legend. Up until then, in the entire clan there was only one shriveled, oreless husk of a Nirvana fruit. Nirvana flowers bloomed when a member of the Fang clan experienced nirvanic rebirth and began to live another lifetime. They were born inside of the body and could enable one to grow incredibly powerful. When that clan member died later on, the Nirvana flower would wither and fade away. However, Nirvana fruit were the absolute pinnacle of power. They could be preserved and passed on as legacies. And now, little Meng Hao actually produced a Nirvana fruit. This matter shook the Fang clan, and many clan members started to view Meng Hao as an extraordinary chosen. However, his father and mother were a bit uneasy about it, and as they watched their son revert from being 7 years of age to an infant, that unease grew more intense. This type of good fortune was something that they didn't dare to think too deeply about. If they did, it caused their hair to stand on end in terror. It was the prospect of a child who, at 7 years of age, had lost an entire lifetime, as if an 8th year of life didn't even exist for him. Meng Hao's paternal grandfather looked on silently. Then one night he left. Before leaving, he told Meng Hao's father and mother that he was going to seek an outsider, who he believed was the only person who could explain what was happening. Meng Hao's maternal grandfather, the venerable old man from the 8th Mountains Meng clan, went with him. The two of them disappeared into the starry sky. Little Meng Hao grew up again, almost as if he had been reincarnated. He did not retain the memories of his previous life, and his personality had changed drastically. He was much quieter. He also noticed the strange looks that many clan members gave him when they thought no one was looking, and it scared him. Such gazes were not the look you would give to a child, but rather some type of heavenly material or earthly treasure. When people looked at him in that way, his older sister would burst into a ranting rage and storm over with Meng Hao in tow to beat them up. She was frequently at his side, watching out for him. "Don't be scared, little brother. Your big sister is here to protect you." She was 15 or 16 years old now, and was already slender and elegant. However, her violent personality hadn't changed. In fact, she had actually grown more violent. 4. The depiction of Fang Yu protecting Meng Hao might make some readers recall what happened back in the Demon Immortal sect in chapter 611, when she killed 2 Fang clan members who were threatening Meng Hao. One day, a senior member of the clan gave Meng Hao that same strange look, which left him very frightened. Later, he told his father about it. His father smiled and tousled his hair, then rocked him to sleep. After Meng Hao fell asleep, his father turned to leave, his face extremely grim. That day, the entire Fang clan was sent into an explosive uproar, and many miserable shrieks rang out. Meng Hao's father swept through the clan, sword in hand. From that day onward, there were far fewer such gazes cast Meng Hao's way. Time passed. The other children who were once Meng Hao's age were now older, and the people he used to bully began to make progress along the path of cultivation. He could no longer set fire to that increasingly beautiful girl's hair. He was completely incapable of beating up Prince Wei, whom he found so objectionable. None of his former friends would play with him. Although constantly attended by various clan members, he was still plagued by a festering loneliness. Eventually, he also found out about the rebirth he had undergone when he turned 7. The only people who he truly had to accompany him were his father, his mother, and his older sister. During this second lifetime, Meng Hao rarely went outside. Most of those 7 years were spent in silence. Finally, the seventh birthday of his second lifetime arrived, and he once again went through nirvanic rebirth. When it happened, Meng Hao felt fear and pain. His body withered and everything went blurry. It was as if his flesh and blood were fading away. The mark on the back of his hand once again shone with a bizarre glow. The Fang clan was yet again thrown into chaos. As Meng Hao experienced the nirvanic rebirth, his mother held him in her arms and tears flowed down her face onto his. Amid these blurry memories, Meng Hao couldn't help but stare blankly at his mother and the look of pain and heartbreak on her face. Little Meng Hao's voice was hoarse as he said, "Mother, don't cry. Didn't you tell me that this is just like sleeping a bit? I'll rest for a while and then wake up. When I wake up, you have to tell me a story, okay?" His older sister stood off to the side, weeping as she watched her little brother. She was already 20 years old, and to see her little brother grow up twice, only to experience nirvanic rebirth twice, was heartrending. His father stood off to the side, fists clenched tightly at his sides, eyes seemingly on the verge of dripping with tears of blood. Unfortunately, there was no way for him to vent the anguish in his heart. Nirvanic rebirth was certainly heaven-defying. However, for it to happen twice to a young child on his seventh birthday was no good fortune. It was a tribulation. Seventh-year tribulation. If it happened a third time and then a fourth, then what awaited Meng Hao would be certain death. He would leave behind 4 nirvana fruits and would then vanish into nothing. His life would be one in which he never reached 8 years of age. A strange atmosphere fell over the Fang clan. Many were watching, waiting for Meng Hao to complete the nirvanic rebirth and then give bloom to a second nirvana fruit. However, no strange looks could be seen, and no one spoke. They watched as Meng Hao gradually degenerated, once again becoming a young child. The mark on his hand produced a flower, which then bore a nirvana fruit. Thus, the curtain fell on Meng Hao's second, incomplete life. When he finally became an infant yet again, he didn't cry. As his mother held him in her arms, he gazed blankly up at the stars. His mother wept. Trembling, his father lifted his head up and roared. Unfortunately, that didn't change anything. They could see the mark on the back of Meng Hao's hand, the Nirvana brand, and they knew that the third lifetime had begun. This time, he was clearly doomed to experience nirvanic rebirth again on his 7th birthday. There were many aged members of the Fang clan who were observing what was happening. Many of them appeared to be very distressed. Others sighed. Word of the matter finally began to spread outside the clan. However, the secret of nirvanic rebirth was maintained. The only thing that people on the outside knew was that the Fang clan's eldest grandchild, the direct descendant of the bloodline, was born with tribulation attached to him. Every 7 years he would experience such tribulation. A child like that was essentially crippled. Meng Hao's mother spent her days with tears staining her face. His older sister's violent temper had her getting into fights virtually every day, as if that were the only way to vent the anger in her heart. His father did everything in his power to figure out a way to solve the problem, but it was all in vain. His 2 grandfathers never returned. When he was 1 year old during his 3rd lifetime, a young man came to planet East Victory. His arrival caused the elder members of the clan to reel in shock. One after another, they came out to bow in respect. The young man said he had been sent by Meng Hao's grandfathers. After laying eyes on Meng Hao, he was silent for a long time. His face flickered with memories and conflicting emotions, as well as surprise. In life, all things relate to the reaping and sowing of karma. Farming is an example. You must work hard before you can bring in the harvest. You must pay out before you can profit. As a husband and wife, are the 2 of you willing to abandon any future glory, to give up your current status and become the prison wardens of the 9th mountain, to guard the door of South Heaven for 100,000 years? Are you willing, no matter what heaven-shaking, earth-shattering events take place, no matter what calamitous tribulations occur in the outside world, to spend 100,000 tedious years in that one place and not step foot outside of South Heaven? Are you willing to guard the gate of South Heaven and not let any living beings from the outside world pass through it? If you are willing to leave behind everything that has been polluted by your karma, then take this child to South Heaven. That place is the origin of the entire 9th mountain. If you take him there, then you must leave him before his 7th birthday. Keep your distance from him until the day he reaches Tao seeking. You must not meet him and must not allow your karma to contaminate him. All of this will depend on the level of your sincerity. If you are truly sincere, then you can succeed. He must not be surnamed Fang. Have him take his mother's surname. If you do these things, then perhaps he will have a chance at a life. This chapter was sponsored by Nightrunners. End of Book 5, Nirvanic Rebirth, Blood Everywhere. Book 6, Fame That Rocks the Ninth Mountain, The Path to True Immortality. Chapter 801, We Will Meet Again. Meng Hao's father and mother didn't hesitate for even a moment. As long as there was a chance for Meng Hao to get better, they were willing to pay any price. If that price was a loss of freedom, requiring them to relinquish their status and prestige and go to planet South Heaven to guard it for 100,000 years, then they were willing. They would leave planet East Victory and take Meng Hao and his older sister with them. They would leave the Fang clan. On the eve of their departure, the entire elder generation of the Fang clan emerged to see them off. Because they could not take anything contaminated with their karma, Meng Hao's father was forced to leave everything behind. The only thing he took was an iron sword. They did not take Meng Hao's 2 nirvana fruits with them. The clan's elder generation, including the patriarch, chose to hold them in safekeeping. When Meng Hao recovered and returned, the 2 nirvana fruits would belong to him. Meng Hao's father sneered coldly at this. How could he not understand the true meaning behind the directive? Originally, he hadn't planned to leave the nirvana fruits behind. Very well, the nirvana fruits will be left here with the clan chief, he said, his eyes glittering with a sharp light. In a few years, Hayar will personally return to retrieve them. With that, he tossed out the precious treasures that were the nirvana fruits. Of course, what the elders didn't know was that, to Meng Hao's father, these 2 precious treasures were actually the source of incredible sorrow. They left a few days later, taking Meng Hao and his older sister with them. Ever since the most recent nirvanic rebirth, he had been lethargic and somewhat blank. When they arrived at planet South Heaven, they went to the remote state of Zhao, beneath Mount Daqing, and settled in Yunji County. Meng Hao's sister didn't stay with them. She went to the Eastern Lands, where she joined the Eastern Lands division of the Fang clan and focused on cultivation. She wanted to leave her father and mother alone to spend what remained of the 7 years with her little brother. During those 7 years, Meng Hao was actually very happy. He gradually grew intelligent and began to focus on studying. On the eve of his 7th birthday, a violent wind gusted outside. His parents were heartbroken and anxious, but to save his life, they left. They had no other choice. When he awoke and began to weep, his parents broke down. //. Meng Hao opened his eyes. The tears streaming down his face had soaked his garments. The vision faded, and he saw his father and mother sitting there in front of him. He could now see some white hairs on his mother's head that hadn't been there before. His father's face looked older than it had in the past. They were looking at Meng Hao with a love that made his heart tremble. Now he understood everything. His doubts were resolved, his questions answered. When he saw the events that had taken place in his previous 2 lifetimes, they seemed like a dream. Yet now he had awakened, and still, everything that had happened during the dream remained in his head and would never be wiped away. 7th year tribulation, he thought. My parents agreed to guard this place for 100,000 years. For me, 100,000 years. Meng Hao couldn't even wrap his head around such an incredible period of time. The twisted feeling in his heart was completely gone. He no longer felt wronged and, in fact, felt a bit of pain and regret. His parents did not deserve blame. They had paid far, far too much and never complained even once. They made no demands of him nor asked for any compensation. They only wanted for him to live. Meng Hao trembled, and even more tears began to stream down his face. "Mom," he said softly, "Dad." Trembling, his mom stepped forward and took him into her arms. She was crying too. "Hayar, everything's going to be fine. You transcended the tribulation. Everything will be okay." Meng Hao's father, once the eldest son and direct bloodline descendant of the Fang clan, an astonishing chosen still marveled at in the outside world, stepped forward and wrapped his arms around his wife and son. "It's past us now, Hayar. It's all in the past now." His voice quavered a bit, and he was crying too. This was only the 2nd time he had ever cried as an adult. The first time was when Meng Hao experienced nirvanic rebirth for the 2nd time. When he watched his son revert from 7 to an infant, when he saw the pain on Meng Hao's tiny face, when he saw his eyes slowly grow listless. He had cried. "What about my big sister?" Meng Hao asked softly. He would never be able to forget the image of his stern older sister protecting him in his 2nd lifetime. Nor would he ever forget the words she had spoken. "Don't be scared, little brother. Your big sister is here to protect you." Weeping happily, his mother responded, "She's been in secluded meditation in the eastern lands for some time. After we go back, we'll wait for her to emerge, and then we can have a big reunion." "What about Grandpa Ming and Grandpa Feng?" asked Meng Hao. When he asked the question, his father stood there silently for a moment. Meng Hao's heart began to thump. He remembered that his two grandfathers had left together to go search for an outsider. The outsider came, but his two grandfathers had never returned. After a long moment, his father said, "All things come with a price. Your Grandpa Ming's and Grandpa Feng's life lamps still burn. They are still alive, but we don't know where they are." Meng Hao sat there silently, his heart twinging painfully. Now that he knew the reason for everything, he felt deep guilt regarding his two grandfathers. Were it not for them, that outsider would never have appeared, and he would have long since returned to the dust, with only 4 nirvana fruits left behind. It was because of him that his two grandfathers had never returned. Furthermore, his parents were stuck guarding South Heaven for 100,000 years. When he thought about this, Meng Hao felt even worse. He looked at his parents, and although he didn't say anything, his feelings were already etched deeply in his heart. He would never be able to pay back the kindness shown to him by his parents and relatives. Patriarch Blood Demon never awoke, and soon it came time for Meng Hao to leave with his father and mother. His father and mother faced to Mount Blood Demon, clasped hands and bowed deeply. A few days later, when the restoration work was well underway in the southern domain, Meng Hao and his parents left. Before returning to the eastern lands, they went to visit his master, Pill Demon. His mother and father were very grateful for everything Pill Demon had done, and even offered expensive gifts. In response, however, Pill Demon's face darkened. It didn't matter that he was facing people with mighty cultivation bases. He refused to accept the gifts. "Meng Hao is my disciple. How could I accept gifts from you?" he said. Meng Hao's father clasped hands and bowed deeply to him, then sent out a strand of his Tao will, which solidified inside of Pill Demon's body and caused a tremor to run through him. Tao will such as this was very important to Pill Demon, and would help him verify his path of cultivation. "How rude of us," said Meng Hao's father. "Forgive me, Grandmaster. Please accept this strand of Tao will. Hayar was not born in the lands of South Heaven, so the immortal destiny for this 10,000-year period cannot belong to him. Grandmaster, I very much admire your aspirations regarding the Tao. When your true immortal tribulation arrives, I will personally act as a Tao protector for you." They stayed in the Violet Fate sect for several days. Chu Yuyan continuously avoided Meng Hao, which made him sigh. However, he didn't force the matter and eventually left with his parents. They went to visit Patriarch Song and then finally left the southern domain. When they transformed into beams of prismatic light that shot off into the distance, Chu Yuyan was standing proudly on a mountain peak in the Violet Fate sect. She said nothing, but merely stood there, looking somewhat desolate. When Pill Demon caught sight of her, he sighed. It was in this fashion that Meng Hao left the southern domain with his parents. On the way, Meng Hao mentioned that he wanted to stop by the Milky Way Sea to look for that old turtle Patriarch Reliance. Meng Hao's mother shook her head with a smile. "The turtle you're talking about left a long time ago. He's not in the lands of South Heaven anymore." Meng Hao gaped, and then a hateful expression appeared on his face. "It's a good thing he left so quickly," he thought to himself. "Otherwise I would have tracked him down and shown him a thing or two." Meanwhile, out in the starry sky, an enormous turtle was drifting among the stars. He had an entire continent on his back, upon which existed countless lives, including numerous cultivators and sects. Of course, they didn't realize they were floating out among the stars. When they looked up, what they saw was a magically produced sky. The turtle, of course, was none other than Patriarch Reliance. Currently, his head was tucked inside of his shell, and he was humming a little tune. He looked incredibly happy and proud of himself. "Heh heh heh. The Patriarch is the most incredible, yet again. Now that I've fled out here, that little bastard will never be able to find me. Ha ha ha, from now on my future is as boundless as the sea and sky. The Patriarch has freedom at last. Let's see how that little bastard reacts when he finds out that I'm no longer on planet South Heaven. He'll be struck dumb. Ha ha ha." The thought of Meng Hao going to the Milky Way Sea to look for him, only to be unable to find him, caused Patriarch Reliance's spirits to instantly be lifted even higher. He continued to muse on how he was vastly more intelligent than Meng Hao. "You want the Patriarch to be your Tao protector? Impossible. AI. It's all the fault of those old bastards from the League of Demon Sealers. They must have damaged my brain somehow. How come it didn't occur to me before that I could simply fly away from planet South Heaven? Although it's better late than never. Now that I've finally flown away from South Heaven, I feel like I've actually gotten smarter. Where should I go now? It doesn't really matter. I remember that years ago I had a beloved on planet East Victory. I wonder how she's doing after all these years. I should go see my old sweetheart. Sighing somewhat emotionally, Patriarch Reliance flickered as he shot toward planet East Victory, taking the state of Zhao with him. As he flew, he hummed his little tune, feeling extremely happy. There was someone else speeding along through the starry sky. It was a crazy old man who was clearly not immortal. However, for some reason, he emanated a strong immortal chi and was capable of flying among the stars. Immortal ascension, immortal ascension. As his voice echoed out, a strange transformation seemed to be occurring. His face was ancient for a moment, but then looked young all of a sudden. However, the old face and the young face looked different from each other. They were two different people. This was the 10th Wang clan patriarch. As for the transformation to his appearance, were Meng Hao here, he would recognize that young face. It was none other than Wang Tengfei, whose soul had been swallowed up by his ancestor. Meanwhile, two figures appeared on the border between the northern reaches and the eastern lands, creeping forward stealthily. One of them was a young man in black robes who looked delicate and pretty, almost like a scholar. If you looked closely, he actually resembled Meng Hao. However, there was a perverted expression in his eyes that completely ruined the entire image. Next to him was a tall, fat man, who occasionally mumbled complaints. Run, run, run away. All you know how to do is run away. I've been telling you all along this is wrong. It's immoral. It's very, very shameless. We should never have fled back then. We're finished. Completely finished. Meng Hao has become incredibly powerful. What do we do now? What is Lord Third supposed to do now? Shut the hell up, the young man replied loftily, looking at the fat man out of the corner of his eye. Lord Fifth hasn't even said anything yet. What are you flapping your gums for? What the hell do you want? Let me ask you, do you know what comes after 3? Can you count all the way to 5? Well, Lord Fifth can. Have faith in the Lord Fifth, gain eternal life. Lord Fifth is taking you to the eastern lands. With this feather that fell from the sky, we're definitely going to be able to live the good life. The young man shook his body in much the same way that a bird does when straightening out its feathers. Chapter 802, Immortal Ancient Dao Medallion. In the vast eastern lands was the ancient city of Chang'an. It was a place that countless scholars in the lands of South Heaven dreamed of. All hungered to pay homage to the Great Tang and to stroll through Chang'an. The military strength of the Great Tang was incredible, and it even possessed garrison states populated entirely by cultivators. There was no location in the mortal worlds of South Heaven where people did not pay homage to the Great Tang. It was no surprise that there were great numbers of sects and clans in the eastern lands. Their strength and influence exceeded that of any of the powers that existed in the northern reaches, southern domain, or western desert. In terms of sects alone, there were 9 major ones. In addition, there were 7 great clans with vast numbers of disciples, followers, and clan members. The eastern lands were a flourishing place with countless chosen, many famous even in the other continents. Even the imperial family had its own Taoist teachings and doctrines, which they used to exercise control over the whole continent. Emperor Tang himself possessed a powerful cultivation base, and although he rarely made public appearances, his power held sway over all the land. Chang'an was the center of it all, and was encircled by 10 defensive fortresses. Of those, 8 belonged directly to the Great Tang, with the remaining fortresses belonging to 2 different clans. One was the Fang clan, and the other was the Jai clan. Just because they occupied the defensive fortresses didn't mean these 2 clans bowed their heads to the power of the emperor. They were independent, and in fact, above everyone else. It was the other sects and clans who bowed their heads to them. This was especially true of the Jai clan. The heavens themselves belonged to the Jai clan, so who was there that could possibly surpass them? As for the Fang clan, they had vast and powerful resources at their disposal. Although they were only a subdivision of the main clan, they were still deep and immeasurable. Of course, in compliance with their clan rules, they respected the Great Tang and would protect the Tang dynasty for all time. After all, the Tang emperor was surnamed Li. 1. The character in the surname of the Tang emperor is Chinese letter, which is a very common name. It's same as Lord Li, previous ruler of the 9th mountain as well as the Li clan, which we know exists on planet North Reed, and whose auxiliary branch was destroyed by Meng Hao. However, despite the fact that these were the circumstances surrounding Meng Hao at the moment, They were far distant from his daily life. Currently, Meng Hao sat cross-legged in a courtyard in the Fang clan, underneath an ancient tree. Sitting next to him was a trembling little crocodile who was also cautiously looking at the man sitting cross-legged in front of Meng Hao. That man was none other than Meng Hao's father. "Hey R," he said, "your future path is your own to tread. As to what you do and how you do it, your mother and I can assist from the sidelines but will not help you directly. The most important thing you should focus on is immortal ascension. You're already halfway into true immortality, lacking only that final half step. Then you will be in the immortal realm. The chance to gain true immortality is something that comes along once every 10,000 years. There are many cultivators of the elder generation, and even current chosen, who are willing to suppress their own cultivation bases, all for the chance to get that true immortal destiny. During this 10,000-year period, the true immortal destiny lies in the lands of South Heaven. However, since you weren't born on South Heaven, it cannot belong to you. The location of your true immortality is on planet East Victory. The simplest way to achieve true immortal ascension is by means of the rarely seen immortality illumination vine. Use that to gain enlightenment regarding the meaning of immortality, and you can achieve true immortal ascension. Although immortality illumination vines are rare, it is not impossible to acquire them. In fact, there are enough that, during each 10,000-year period, most powerful sects manage to produce one or two true immortals. However, the vines are only effective in the 1,000 years after the true immortal destiny appears. The second way to achieve true immortal ascension is very difficult, and that is to acquire the immortal destiny that appears once every 10,000 years, and use it to tread the path to true immortality. That is the path your master pill demon must take. Both of these types of immortals are true immortals. Your master is going about it the most difficult way. If he succeeds, then he will most certainly be taken away by some powerful organization and made a conclave disciple. Therefore, when the time comes for your master's true immortal ascension, the lands of South Heaven are going to be a very lively place. The various chosen of other sects and clans who have left South Heaven will return to fight for their chance. When that time comes, I will act as Tao protector for your master. As for you, after you help your master transcend his tribulation, then you will go to planet East Victory. Father has already prepared an immortality illumination vine for you there. Initially, using the immortality illumination vine produces a slightly inferior result. However, cultivation isn't always dependent on the first steps, and using that method can also lead you to great glory. "So there are only these two ways to achieve true immortal ascension?" asked Meng Hao, a bit surprised. "Why could the resurrection lily achieve it?" "People aren't flowers and flowers aren't people. The path of the resurrection lily can be learned from, but if cultivators try to follow it, they will find it very difficult to realize their Tao. There is a third path which is not dependent on any of the planets or any immortal lands. It is to achieve true immortality by your own power. This is a very rare thing. According to the legends, only Patriarch letter 1E63ITIGARBH of the Earth Store Bodhisattva of the Fourth Mountain 1. Ksitigarbha was previously mentioned in chapter 702, has ever traveled that path. Other than him, no one has ever pulled it off. When he did, it caused all of the immortal chi in the mountain and sea realm to surge and swirl towards him, such that everyone knew about it. As to how to tread that path, even I don't know. Meng Hao's father shook his head. Even though he had a high opinion of Meng Hao, he didn't think it was possible for him to tread that third path. "For now," he said, looking at Meng Hao sternly, "focus on my 9 sword forms. Make sure you understand them thoroughly." Sadly, Meng Hao's older sister Fang Yu was still unable to emerge from secluded meditation. Meng Hao's return had caused many in South Heaven's Fang clan to act with great caution. They were unfamiliar with him and didn't dare even try to probe him for information. Word of Meng Hao's deeds in the southern domain had long since spread amongst the cultivators of the vast eastern lands. When it came to the Jai clan, quite a few people there were currently vacillating nervously. Those were the chosen who owed Meng Hao spirit stones from back in the demon immortal sect. There were chosen from other sects in the eastern lands as well, all with mixed feelings about Meng Hao. As they sat there beneath the tree, Meng Hao's father waved his hand, causing a scintillating command medallion to fly out toward Meng Hao. It came to rest in front of him, floating in the air. It took only a glance for Meng Hao to sense the vast ancientness pulsing off of it. "This is an immortal ancient Tao medallion," said Meng Hao's father. In the future, when you leave the lands of South Heaven, you could return home to the clan to continue your cultivation, or you could use this medallion to join the Ninth Mountain's immortal ancient Taoist rite and cultivate their Taoist magic. In the Ninth Mountain and Sea, there are many immortal ancient Taoist rite temples. Whenever one of those temples opens its doors, it will attract a lot of attention. Currently, only the immortal ancient Taoist rite of the Ninth Mountain continues to pass on its legacies. Many cultivators practice cultivation among them, making them one of the most superlative Taoist societies in the Ninth Mountain. By the time any Taoist rite temple is revealed to the world, it will already long since been left untended and abandoned. Only the most powerful of chosen can join the immortal ancient Taoist rite. Lord Li joined, as did Lord Jai. The Fang patriarch of that era also joined. Their requirements for accepting disciples are very strict. However, if you possess an immortal ancient Tao medallion, then you can join directly as a conclave disciple. Take good care of this medallion. The medallion has another function. I happen to discover an immortal ancient Taoist rite temple. Although it's deserted, if you enter it, the temple will automatically come to life. Accept the medallion's guidance, and you can cultivate enlightenment in the temple. It will greatly improve your chances at achieving immortal ascension. However, after the immortal ancient Taoist rite temple comes to life, others will detect it. Therefore, chosen from the sects and clans of the other planets will come to try to seize the luck and good fortune in the temple. What they will be most interested in obtaining is the immortal ancient Tao medallion. That will be your chance to hone your skills. Meng Hao looked closer at the medallion, and inside he could just barely make out an immortal ancient Taoist rite temple filled with countless figures practicing cultivation. There was also a glowing immortal giving a sermon on the Tao. The music of a great Tao floated through the air, which Meng Hao couldn't hear clearly. However, it caused him to perceive an unusual sensation of being bathed in a celestial radiance, with immortal qi swirling around him. After a long moment, he trembled and recovered his senses. He quickly reached out to take hold of the immortal ancient Tao medallion. Keep the Tao medallion safe and achieve immortal ascension. Those are my tests for you. If you can't accomplish these things, then it would be better for you to stay here with me and your mother. If you can fight with all your might against the chosen of the sects and clans of the other planets, if you can protect this medallion, if you can achieve true immortal ascension, then your mother and I will be confident that you are ready to leave us and forge your own glorious future. Meng Hao clutched the immortal ancient Tao medallion, looked up at his father, and slowly nodded. Meng Hao's father looked back and then smiled. It was a smile full of love and encouragement. Go, he said, leave this crocodile here. When you achieve immortal ascension, it will be the mount you can use when you leave. Hayar, you did not have me and your mother at your side in this lifetime. You've reached your current stage by relying only on your own efforts. Likewise, I believe that in the future, you won't need help from me or your mother. Your path will lead you much further, and you can do it on your own. Meng Hao took a deep breath and then bowed to his father. Now go, we cultivators don't focus on the trifles in life. Besides, you've grown up. His father's smile grew wider. From the look in his eye, you could see that he wished for his son to be a dragon, to truly succeed. It was a look similar to the one Meng Hao had seen in the eyes of Qi Yunhai. Meng Hao rose to his feet and caught sight of his mother approaching. She walked up to him, adjusted his clothes, and looked at him lovingly. She clearly did not wish to part with him and was also worried. Mom, I'm fine, he said with a bashful smile. When she saw his smile, his mother shook her head. That's the same smile you used to make when you were little, she said, whenever you were about to get into mischief. Meng Hao's smile grew even more bashful. He chatted a bit more with his parents, then clasped hands and bowed. Giving them a final deep look, he turned and made his way into the distance. They watched him leaving, and Meng Hao's mother sighed. This is how cultivators were meant to practice cultivation, his father said calmly. Hayar is a dragon amongst men. His path is his own to tread. I'm still worried, though, his mother said. It was without our help that he stepped halfway into true immortality, his father replied proudly. He's grown up, and given his personality, it would be impossible for him to stay with us here for 100,000 years. Since we can't leave, he needs to temper himself with appropriate challenges. Moreover, in all the Ninth Mountain and Sea, there truly are few who have achieved a cultivation base like his at such an age. I'm just afraid that this immortal, ancient Taoist rite temple that you've activated will attract people above the spirit realm, his mother said softly. Meng Hao's father laughed coolly. Fang Ziyufeng makes the rules here on planet South Heaven, and I say, if anyone above the spirit realm dares to enter, I'll just kill them. Meng Hao left the Fang clan, the first time he had done so since arriving. The streets were busy, and as he looked around at the bustle, it was clear this was a city of mortals. There were cultivators present too, but they didn't dare act superior to others. Apparently, cultivators were not permitted to act aggressively in the lands controlled by the Great Tang. Meng Hao looked up, and off in the distance he could see an enormous city. That was Chang'an. At first glance it looked ordinary, but when Meng Hao circulated his immortal qi, he was shocked to find that there were 95 gold dragons spiraling through the air above the city. Occasionally they would let out shocking roars. Of course, it was something that everyone else could not see or hear. Gradually, the 95 dragons merged together into a figure sitting there in midair. When Meng Hao looked at it, the figure seemed to sense his gaze and then looked back at him. Suddenly, a majestic voice filled Meng Hao's mind. The son of elder brother Fang. As expected, you are quite extraordinary. It's a pleasure to meet you. Allow me to bless you with some qi reserves to incorporate into your body. The 95 dragons each spit streams of draconic qi, which merged into an extremely lifelike golden dragon. It turned into a golden beam of light that shot through the air and merged into Meng Hao. As it swirled through his body, an incredibly refreshing feeling filled him. Cracking sounds rang out from inside him, and an otherworldly aura seemed to wash over him, like a baptism. It almost seemed as if he had formed a resonance with the land, and could now see various Taoist magics and natural laws wherever he looked. Meng Hao's mind trembled as the figure looked away from him. Emperor Tang, gasped Meng Hao. He was certain that the person just now was the Emperor of the Great Tang. The lands of South Heaven are filled with hidden dragons and crouching tigers, he thought. The Emperor of the Great Tang has an unfathomable cultivation base. Is South Heaven the only place like this, or are the other planets similar? Perhaps only people in the same realm as Father can understand such things. Meng Hao clasped hands and bowed toward Chang'an. Then, he transformed into a beam of colorful light as he followed the immortal ancient Tao medallion's guidance toward the temple. His second true self became the shadow beneath him, following him wherever he went. Meng Hao had just appeared outside the city and was about to head off into the distance when his eyes glittered. I heard Mom say that the Jai clan isn't too far away from here. A bashful smile appeared on his face, and he rubbed his bag of holding. He still had many promissory notes inside, some of which were written by chosen of the Jai clan. I think it's time to go settle accounts, Meng Hao thought with a dry cough. He took out a jade slip which contained a detailed map of the vast eastern lands. After examining it for a moment, he headed toward the Jai clan's fortress. Chapter 803, Going to the Jai clan to collect debts. The Jai clan didn't just have one ancestral mansion, but many. The one located within the fortress was just one of those. It was enormous and sprawling, taking up roughly 30% of the entire fortress. On the outside it looked relatively ordinary, but once you stepped inside, you would catch sight of indescribably beautiful carved balustrades and marble steps. An ancient, aged wool emanated out in all directions, making every block of wood and stone seem sentient. It was something completely extraordinary that even the eastern lands, Fang clan, couldn't equal. Meng Hao navigated his way through the fortress using the map, and eventually found the Jai clan's main gate. He walked up to the gate and cleared his throat. Looking around, he didn't see anyone standing guard. He knocked and, seeing no reaction from within, flew up into the air and prepared to simply fly into the mansion. However, a massive pressure bore down on him as soon as he rose up. Clearly, the airspace here was restricted. Meng Hao suddenly heard someone chuckling behind him. Fellow Taoist, don't waste your time. People like you come here every day hoping to pay respects to the Jai clan. There were two cultivators there who had caught sight of Meng Hao as they were passing by. The Jai clan is the #1 clan in the lands of South Heaven, said the first one, and this is one of their ancestral mansions. You think you can just waltz right in. The only way to get inside is if you're invited by the Jai clan. Why even try, chuckled the second one. You might end up irritating one of the Jai clan members, and then you'd be in grave danger. Actually, Meng Hao's handsome appearance and down-to-earth disposition left these two cultivators with a good impression, so they were genuinely trying to help him out. I'm not here to pay respects, said Meng Hao, coughing lightly. I'm here to collect some debts. His eyes suddenly glittered brightly as he caught sight of the two iron hoop handles that adorned the main gate. The two iron hoops seemed ordinary, but using his celestial vision technique, he could instantly sense the aura of ancient magical symbols pulsing off them. These things are magical treasures, Meng Hao thought. Taking a step forward, he grabbed one of the iron hoops and then yanked hard on it. Unfortunately, the gate didn't budge an inch. The two startled cultivators looked on in shock. "Fellow Taoist, what are you doing?" Meng Hao took a deep breath, and a strange gleam appeared in his eyes. As he prepared to yank on the iron hoop a second time, the wide-eyed cultivators behind him began to back up. They came to the citadel frequently to shop, and often saw cultivators pacing back and forth in front of the Jai clan's main gate, hoping to gain entrance to offer respects. However, they had never seen someone covet the iron hoops on the main gate. The mere sight of it made their scalps numb. As they backed up, Meng Hao wrenched at the iron hoop with full force. Some distance away, a group of 7 or 8 youths were loitering on the street corner, chatting and laughing. When they noticed what Meng Hao was doing, one of their number gaped for a moment and then let out a roar of fury. He instantly flew into the air toward Meng Hao. "How brazen! Did you just eat a dragon heart? How dare you behave so boorishly in front of the Jai clan?" The two cultivators near Meng Hao were so scared they could barely speak, and began to back up even faster. "Not good, it's Jai Zuming. He's a quasi-ray disciple of the Jai clan." Jai Zuming's hands flashed in an incantation gesture as he whistled through the air. Bright light pulsed off his body, then transformed into a long spear that emanated a strong force like a tornado. He stabbed the spear toward Meng Hao without hesitation. Standing at the entrance to the Jai clan, Meng Hao turned his head to look at the incoming spear, then gave a cold snort. He waved his right index finger, causing the long spear to tremble and explode into pieces. The shockwave didn't even lift a hair on Meng Hao's head, but Jai Zuming was sent tumbling backward through the air. He slammed into the ground about 300 meters away, coughing up blood, his face ashen. His companions, faces filled with rage as they looked over at Meng Hao. "Looking to die?" Jai Zuming howled, crawling to his feet. His cultivation base was at the late nascent soul stage, and although Meng Hao's cultivation base was invisible to him, he raged at him nonetheless. "You're Jai Zuming?" Meng Hao asked. "Okay, hold on a second." With that, Meng Hao slapped his bag of holding to produce a large stack of promissory notes. After flipping through them for a moment, his eyes sparkled and pulled out one in particular. "Are you related to Jai Zulin?" he continued, sounding hopeful. 1. In traditional Chinese culture, all males of the same generation in a family will have the same first character in their given name. In this case, it would be logical to assume that since the first character in Jai Zuming's name is Zhu, that he would be related to Jai Zulin, who also has the character Zhu. Incidentally, Madame Deathblade's family follows this tradition, so her brother and cousins all have the character Jai Chinese letter in their given name. "He's my big brother. How dare you act so wildly in the Jai clan? You're dead." With a shrill cry, he waved his right hand, causing spiritual energy to surge in midair, giving rise to ripples that only a cultivator could see. Meng Hao smiled bashfully, then ignored Jai Zuming and looked back at the iron hoops. He was getting even more excited about them. "This is really a lovely treasure," he thought, causing his cultivation base to begin to rotate. His Dharma idol flickered into being behind him, which then reached down to grab an iron ring and yank on it. A boom could be heard as the entire main gate shuddered. Even the ground quaked as the iron ring was ripped off the door by Meng Hao. The two cultivators who had just been trying to persuade Meng Hao to leave were now watching with wide eyes. Jai Zuming's companions' eyes went even wider with disbelief, as if they had seen a ghost. As for Jai Zuming, his shrill cry gurgled to a stop, and he gaped at Meng Hao in shock. The huge boom had echoed throughout the city, and quite a few cultivators hurried over to see what was happening. When they saw what was going on, they instantly cried out in shock. He ripped off a door hoop. That's impossible. Is that guy crazy? How could he possibly dare to provoke the Jai clan? This is the Jai clan's ancestral mansion, a representation of the whole clan's face, and yet, he actually ripped a door hoop off. He's poking the heavens in the eye. A buzz of conversation immediately echoed out. Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever as he hefted the iron hoop to get a sense of its weight. Then his eyes shone with a gleam of pleasure. Truly a lovely treasure, he thought. It was at this point that his head swiveled to look at the other iron hoop. He was just about to reach out and grab it when a cold snort echoed out from inside the Jai clan. Next, the gates silently swung open and a young man walked out. His long hair draped over his shoulders, and his features were handsome, albeit cold. A spirit-severing aura swirled around him as he strode out. Instantly, a rumbling sound filled the air, as if bizarre ripples were spreading out from his body. "According to the clan rules," the young man said as he walked out, "anyone who damages the clan gate will be exterminated to the 9th degree of kinship." He looked over coldly at Meng Hao, and then suddenly, his jaw dropped. 300 meters away, Jai Zuming didn't notice that point. He was extremely excited and cried out, "Big brother, kill that guy." Meng Hao's eyes gleamed with a strange light. As soon as he laid eyes on this newcomer, he couldn't help but feel happy. He laughed loudly and then said, "Fellow Taoist Zulin, do you remember me?" At first, the young man's bearing had been cold and aloof, but after looking closely at Meng Hao and hearing his words, his face went deathly white. Even with a steelier will, he would still have cried out hoarsely in alarm. As it was, he couldn't stop himself from staggering backwards several paces. "No, I don't remember," he cried out, then slammed the gate shut. Eyes glittering, Meng Hao lifted his right foot up and then kicked hard onto the huge gate. A boom echoed out as the gate crashed open. Jai Zulin was on the other side and was sent tumbling backward, blood spurting out of his mouth. Then he began to cry out loudly. "Meng Hao's here, Meng Hao's here." His urgent call immediately caused the faces of numerous Jai clan old-timers to flicker. The chosen who happened to be in the mansion didn't comprise all of the Jai clan chosen, but 4 or 5 of them happened to owe Meng Hao spirit stones, and their faces filled with shock. When the people gathered outside the Jai clan heard Jai Zulin's call, they were completely taken aback. Many weren't able to put the pieces together, but there were some whose expressions flickered with understanding. "Meng Hao, that's the guy who ended the war between the southern domain and the northern reaches. He's half a step into true immortality and is the #1 figure in his generation." "It's him. He's actually in the eastern lands. Damn it. Now that I think about it, the sect issued orders recently that we are not to offend Meng Hao in any way. I didn't understand before because I thought he was in the southern domain. But it turns out he's already in the eastern lands. So, he really is Meng Hao." Stories of the War of the Southern Domain had long since spread widely throughout all the lands, and Meng Hao's name could be heard everywhere. He had sealed the cultivation bases of more than 100,000 northern reaches cultivators, cutting off their path to the nascent soul stage and reducing them to felon citizens. Furthermore, he had summoned a huge mountain to suppress 5 peak Dao-seeking experts. Because of all of that, Meng Hao was now thoroughly famous in all the lands of South Heaven. Jai Zuming stood there quivering, face pale and eyes wide. He vaguely remembered that some time ago, word had been passed down through the clan forbidding anyone from provoking Meng Hao. Everything trembled as Meng Hao entered the Jai clan. As he passed the nearly destroyed gate, he casually reached down to wrench off the other iron hoop, which he put in his bag of holding. The sight of him doing so caused gasps to rise up from the people who stood outside watching. Meng Hao's domineering manner had already left them with a deep impression. On the other hand, flames of rage could be seen burning in the Jai clan members' eyes. After all, there were only a few people who actually owed him spirit stones. To all the other members of the Jai clan, Meng Hao's actions just now were nothing short of blasphemous. Immediately, 8 older members of the clan snorted coldly and then stepped forward. Hands were waved, and divine abilities appeared. However, when they neared Meng Hao, his eyes flickered and he flicked his sleeve. Rumbling echoed out as a storm wind rose up. It blasted out in all directions, causing the 8 older clan members to tumble back with blood spraying from their mouths. Meng Hao cleared his throat and pulled out some promissory notes. "I'm not here to cause a ruckus," he said as he began leafing through the notes. "I just want to collect some debts. Jai Zulin, Jai Tianyi, Jai Xianxia." In a brief moment, he recited 7 or 8 names. Finally, he looked up. "When exactly were you people planning on paying me back the tens of millions of spirit stones you owe me? Hand them over." His voice roared out to be heard not only by the entire Jai clan, but also everyone on the outside. Instantly, all of the people whose names he recited, with the exception of those not present, suddenly grew incredibly wrathful. How could they not? After all, the sheer amount of spirit stones owed made it impossible for them to pay off the debt. "You're shameless, Meng Hao. You forced us to write those promissory notes." "We didn't want to write them. You made us." "Yeah, you threatened us. We had no choice but to sign the promissory notes, so they don't count." When the other Jai clan members heard what was being cried out, they couldn't help but be shocked. The cultivators on the outside were also looking on with wide eyes. I can't believe Meng Hao was so daring back then. He actually forced Jai clan chosen to write promissory notes. Tens of millions of spirit stones. How? How do you force someone to the point of signing that kind of promissory note? Meng Hao's eyes went dark. Not going to acknowledge your debt. This chapter was sponsored by Jake Ridgway. Chapter 804, Debts Must Be Repaid. The Jai clan members glared furiously at Meng Hao, their eyes brimming with killing intent. For years on end, no one had dared to crash through the Jai clan's gate. Well, except for a certain husband and wife. Now Meng Hao was the third person to do so. What a pack of lies, a voice said from among the Jai clan members. At the same time, a surge of energy burst out, accompanied by 3 older clan members. They moved with incredible speed, appearing in front of Meng Hao in the space of one breath. Their cultivation bases emanated the shocking power of Dao seeking, and even as they arrived, they snorted and launched attacks. They knew Meng Hao was extraordinary, which was why they joined forces to attack in unison. Everything trembled violently, even the sun and moon. The illusory image of an altar appeared, rumbling toward Meng Hao and exuding incredible pressure. For the sake of your parents, we won't kill you today, but that doesn't mean we'll let you off without teaching you a lesson. The ground quaked as the altar descended toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao's expression was calm. He smiled and glanced at the incoming altar, then suddenly clenched his fist. Even as his punch sailed through the air, the 9th mountain materialized and slammed into the altar. A huge boom rattled out and the altar was sent spinning backward. The 9th mountain floated there, emanating shocking pressure and, most shocking of all, surrounded by swirling immortal chi. The 3 Jai clan members staggered backward, blood oozing from their mouths, their faces filled with shock. As they fell into retreat, 7 more older clan members flew up into the air. They also joined forces, shoving their hands down from above to summon an enormous lake. Fish swam to and fro within it, and one leapt out and transformed into a red dragon that roared and headed toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao lifted his foot up and took a step forward. The ground quaked as a massive force rippled out in all directions. The 3 Dao-seeking experts coughed up blood and fell back once more, astonishment written on their faces. As for the 7 old clan members who had summoned the red dragon, blood sprayed from their mouths, and they tumbled back through the air like kites with their strings cut. Then there were the ordinary clan members, whose faces fell as they felt themselves shoved back violently, their bodies completely beyond their own control. They looked over in shock at Meng Hao, who stood there, towering above everyone. The people on the outside continued to watch with wide eyes and gaping mouths. To them, Meng Hao looked like a paragon, standing there unmatched and invincible. Debts must be repaid, Meng Hao said, walking forward again. It's a law of heaven and a principle of earth. If you renege on your debt, then I'll just have to come take it myself. As he advanced, the Jai clan members were forced to fall back, as if they couldn't even control their own bodies, literally forced back by an incredible power. One of their number was a young man who suddenly felt an incredible force wrapping around his body. He was suddenly hauled out from the other Jai clan members and pulled directly in front of Meng Hao. It was Jai Zulin. Meng Hao, you're pushing things way too far, he cried shrilly, glaring furiously at Meng Hao. He looked like he was about to fly into a rage, but inwardly he was trembling. Even as the words left his mouth, he braced himself for something horrible to happen. However, he had no choice but to speak. After all, this was the Jai clan, and if he didn't say something, how could he possibly hold his head up in front of his fellow clan members? You owe me money, and I'm here to collect. How is that pushing things too far? In the face of all the nearby Jai clan members, Meng Hao grabbed Jai Zulin's bag of holding and opened it up. He frowned. You barely have more than 1,000,000 spirit stones. How could that be? Meng Hao's tone turned stern. Jai Zulin, that's simply not enough. Okay, let me see. You owe me 7,650,000 spirit stones. He reached out, stuck his hand into Jai Zulin's robe and started to loosen it. Meng Hao, why you? Jai Zulin let out a roar. Meng Hao had just snatched away his bag of holding, then taken some of his other personal belongings. After that, shockingly, he began to disrobe him. This left Jai Zulin frightened out of his wits, filled with unprecedented terror and astonishment. Why you? What are you doing? He wasn't the only one frightened. The other Jai clan members looked on with wide, disbelieving eyes as Meng Hao pulled Jai Zulin's robes off. You owe me money. These clothes are pretty nice. I bet I could sell them for a few spirit stones. Meng Hao put the robes away and then looked at the shivering Jai Zulin. Finally, he heaved a sigh of pity. If I had known things would turn out this way, Meng Hao said, shaking his head sympathetically, I would have done things differently back then. Ah, young people, you shouldn't write promissory notes so easily, you know. I hope that in the future you keep that in mind. Turn over a new leaf. Although, don't forget that you still have to pay me back what you owe me. This little bit today can just be considered interest. Jai Zulin let out a mighty roar, then coughed up a mouthful of blood. He was so enraged that he passed out and flopped over onto the ground, although it was hard to say whether it was real or an act. It was at this point that a cold snort echoed through the air. A shadow passed over the mansion, and an incredibly cold aura spread out. Boundless killing intent roiled through the air as an enormous black hand appeared above. Rumbling pressure weighed down in all directions, transforming into the power of peak Dao seeking. As Meng Hao looked up, the hand descended toward him. Just barely visible behind the huge hand was an old man wearing a black robe. He was thin and emaciated, and emanated an aura of decay and rot, as if he had just climbed up from a grave. You don't qualify to run amok in the Jai clan. Rumbling filled heaven and earth, and astonishing killing intent filled the air. It seemed evil to the extreme, and the bright spring day suddenly turned as cold as dead winter. Black snowflakes fluttered down, and the entire place appeared to have turned into a midwinter battlefield. Suddenly, countless corpses appeared on the battlefield, along with innumerable cultivators locked in deadly combat. All of it was incredibly realistic. It was a Dao-seeking region. It was a peak Dao-seeking region. As Meng Hao stood there in the middle of the region, his face grew dark and grim. Anyone who saw the expression found their hearts suddenly thumping. This version of Meng Hao seemed completely different, a vicious version that had been hiding inside him all along. Killing intent. You can't have more than I do, he said coolly. Suddenly, the shadow beneath his feet rippled and his second true self emerged. At first his eyes were closed, but as he stepped out, they opened and blood-colored light spilled out. The killing intent that radiated out was exponentially stronger than before, causing the sky to change color and the clouds to seethe. The sun and moon trembled as its intensity shook everything in the area. The emaciated man up in midair gasped, and his face filled with disbelief. The surrounding Jai clan members were all shaking in astonishment, and many of them were coughing up mouthfuls of blood. Everyone on the outside felt as if they were frozen in place by icy coldness, and were shivering violently. This was Meng Hao's second true self, who had absorbed his boundless devilish will. The devilish will was shocking. A black aura exploded out from Meng Hao's second true self, transforming into roiling black clouds that formed into the image of an enormous face. The face was matchlessly savage, seeming to contain a madness that wished to exterminate all forms of life. The intense killing intent immediately exerted incredible pressure on the emaciated old man, who felt his scalp go completely numb. His mind was reeling. This ferocious spirit, this killing intent, this madness, or something rarely seen in life. Meng Hao's mood had turned sour. His voice level, he said, as for this battlefield illusion, let me ask you, have you ever seen a real battlefield before? His second true self's body distorted, causing what looked like beams of light to shoot out in all directions, causing a different battlefield to appear. It was a battlefield of complete carnage, with rivers of blood flowing everywhere. A mountain-like giant roared, and a woman was hidden in ball of mist. Fierce fighting raged as people chose to self-detonate rather than see their home be overrun. The ground was stained bright red, and up above in the sky, peak Dao-seeking experts fought at close quarters. One of them laughed uproariously and self-detonated. The scene was incredibly realistic, because these were images of things that had actually occurred in the war between the southern domain and the northern reaches. Have you ever been on a battlefield like that? Asked Meng Hao. His second true self's eyes flickered and he took a step forward. His ferocious spirit merged with the energy of the battlefield, which then rose up into the air to meet the descending pitch-black hand and the emaciated old man. A huge boom rang out as the black hand collapsed into pieces. The emaciated man coughed up blood and was flung backward, coughing up 3 more mouthfuls as he flew. His cultivation base dropped, and cracking sounds rang out as a life-protecting jade slip was destroyed. Without that jade slip, he would most certainly have been dead. Everything was dead silent. The Jai clan members were completely shaken as they stared at Meng Hao. It was the same with the cultivators on the outside. Now that is Meng Hao. He is a chosen who rose to fame during the war between the southern domain and the northern reaches. He's the #1 figure of this generation in the lands of South Heaven. That battlefield just now must have been images from the war. A sharp inhalation could be heard, followed by the image of Meng Hao shaking his head. Couldn't control it fully, he said. With that he made a beckoning motion, and his second true self vanished, turning once more into his shadow. To everyone watching, Meng Hao appeared calm and tranquil again. That's enough, you little punk. The next voice that echoed out was ancient and archaic. It came from deep within the Jai clan ancestral mansion, from a location that looked very different from the beautifully decorated buildings around it. A thatched cottage that seemed completely ordinary in every respect. Suddenly, the cottage's door opened, and a teenager stepped out. He appeared to be about 15 or 16, but had a full head of white hair. His expression was the type you would see on an old man. Clearly, he cultivated some technique that allowed the body to reverse the effects of aging. As soon as he stepped out, everything in front of him trembled. Shockingly, an enormous Dharma idol appeared behind him. The Dharma idol was not humanoid, but rather was an enormous bottle gourd which was a swirl of red, blue, and yellow colors. As soon as it appeared, shocking light spread out to cover over the entire fortress. As soon as the Jai clan cultivators saw the bottle gourd and heard the ancient voice, their spirits were lifted. Regardless of age, they all turned toward the gourd, clasped hands and bowed. Greetings, Patriarch 9. It's Patriarch 9. Greetings, Patriarch 9. Simultaneously, the teenager strode forward a single step. It was as if the entire Jai clan fortress shrunk. In the blink of an eye, he was directly in front of the crowd of Jai clan cultivators. His hands were clasped behind his back, and his white hair floated around him as he stared icily at Meng Hao. This chapter was sponsored by Michael Harrison. Chapter 805, We'll Pay You Back. A false immortal. This was a false immortal. The teenager made his appearance coldly, and as he stood in front of the other Jai clan members, his eyes fell onto Meng Hao. Screw off, he said. He was well aware Meng Hao had powerful backing and didn't want to provoke him. However, the ancestral mansion was under his personal command. If Fang Ziyufeng showed up, he wouldn't dare offend him. But for a member of the junior generation to act this way filled his heart with rage. His appearance immediately caused the surrounding Jai clan members to grow excited. Jai Zulin instantly regained consciousness and looked excitedly at Patriarch 9. Then he looked back at Meng Hao, anticipating his imminent vengeance. You're definitely going to get put in place this time, he thought. Meng Hao cleared his throat and looked up at the enormous bottle gourd Dharma idol floating there. Dharma idol, huh? Meng Hao smiled. Well, I have one too. Eyes glittering, he took a step forward. Up to this point, he hadn't called on the full extent of his power. Now he rotated his cultivation base and immortal chi emerged. As soon as it did, everything trembled and shook, and an enormous Dharma idol appeared that seemed capable of holding up the sky. The strength of this Dharma idol was extraordinarily shocking. It was like some primordial giant whose face was that of Meng Hao. The sky shook and the ground quaked the moment the Dharma idol appeared. Natural law spread out, along with a vast pressure that weighed down on everything. The bottle gourd began to quiver, seemingly expending all its energy as it struggled to fight back against Meng Hao's Dharma idol. The sky looked like it was on the verge of being torn to shreds, and ear-shattering booms filled the air. The incredible pressure seemed capable of tearing heaven and earth apart from each other, and the land looked as if it were about to shatter into pieces. Almost instantly, Meng Hao and the teenager were in a deadlock. The Jai clan members looked on, panting, their expressions blank, scalps numb, minds reeling. They knew Meng Hao was strong, but how could they ever have imagined that he would be this strong? He could even fight Patriarch 9 to a standstill, and their Patriarch 9 was an immortal. The teenager's face sank, and a strange light appeared in his eyes as he looked at Meng Hao. Inwardly, he let out a long sigh. He had known Meng Hao was extraordinary, but it wasn't until he actually faced him that he realized. He had underestimated him. So it's true that he's actually half a step into true immortality. By now, the nearby cultivators had spread the news that Meng Hao had charged into the Jai clan fortress. The news reached other sects, and soon all the powerful experts of the eastern lands knew. Divine sense streamed forth, and gasps could be heard throughout the eastern lands when they saw that Meng Hao could grapple with a false immortal. This Meng Hao is incredible. His father is extraordinary, and so is he. The Fang clan. Countless eyes throughout the eastern lands were now fixed on the Jai clan, and on Meng Hao. His eyes blazed with the desire to do battle. Ever since his incredible cultivation-based breakthrough, he had not battled a false immortal. He truly wished to know how such a battle would turn out. He reached out his hand and pointed toward the teenager, and his desire to fight was clear. "Make your move," he said. The Jai clan cultivators were panting, especially those who normally flaunted their status as chosen. Their faces were pale, and they were forced to admit that there was now a vast, unimaginable gap between themselves and Meng Hao, like the difference between heaven and earth, a chasm that could not easily be crossed. "He is so much stronger than us. It's laughable to say that we are of the same generation. We can shake things up, but he can battle with our patriarch. We don't even qualify to be his opponent." This fact was quite a blow to the chosen. Earlier, they had heard about Meng Hao's strength, but witnessing it with their own eyes was shocking to the soul. As he faced up against a bristling Meng Hao, Patriarch 9 realized that he was in somewhat of a dilemma. As the saying goes, if you ride a tiger, it's hard to get off. Even as he hesitated, an archaic voice suddenly rang out from thin air to fill the Jai clan. The Jai clan cultivates karma. Spirit stones are material objects and can be considered a seed of karma. The Jai clan must not be infected by such karma. Anyone who owes this person spirit stones must pay them back. All of you pay heed. The Jai clan's cultivation is different than that of the masses. To cultivate karma, we must revere karma. If you do not have the power to sever karma, then you must yield to it. Give it to him. Him coming here to ask for his spirit stones is in fact an aid to you in severing karma with him. Do you still not understand? Once the karma is severed, your cultivation will surely flourish. As these few sentences reverberated through the air, the voice vanished. Patriarch 9's body jerked to a stop as he realized the voice had come from the true patriarch of the Jai clan here in the eastern lands. His energy immediately dissipated along with the Dharma idol, and he clasped hands and bowed to Meng Hao. "Many thanks for the assistance you have provided to these children of the Jai clan in severing karma, my young friend. Please inform me of exactly how many spirit stones are owed, and I will give them to you." Many people appeared to be enlightened, and not just members of the Jai clan. As for the handful of chosen who owed spirit stones to Meng Hao, their bodies trembled as brilliant Tao light shone out from them. What seemed to be the music of a great Tao swirled around them, as if their Tao heart was being nudged forward. Meng Hao gaped in shock at this sudden reversal, especially when he saw the Tao light shining off Jai Zulin intensify. From the look of it, he was experiencing a cultivation-based breakthrough, which made Meng Hao breathe deeply. "I can't believe the Jai clan's magic is so heaven-defying," he thought. "Cultivate karma, revere karma, sever karma." He watched wide-eyed as Jai Zulin suddenly clasped hands and bowed to him. "Elder brother Meng, many thanks for helping me to sever the karma from that year." The chosen who owed Meng Hao spirit stones immediately began to clasp hands toward him and bow in thanks. "Many thanks, elder brother Meng. Many thanks, fellow Taoist Meng Hao." Meng Hao abruptly took a few steps back. He was actually a bit angry. He had merely come to collect some debts. How could it have ended with him helping them? Who was that old geezer who was talking just now? He thought, frowning. He's so powerful. With just a few words, not only was he able to settle the dispute, he provided his clan members with good fortune and turned me into the grindstone to help them polish their understanding of severing karma. Damn it, Meng Hao was just about to leave when Patriarch 9 hurried forward, smiling. "Young friend, what are you doing?" he asked. "How many spirit stones do they owe you? Tell me and I'll hand them over to you." No, that's fine," Meng Hao said hastily. "All of us are actually good friends and I was just pulling a little prank. Let's leave the dead in place, all right? I'm in no hurry." By this point, he was already back at the huge gate. "No, that won't do," said the youthful-looking Patriarch 9. "There's no need to say anything more, young friend. You're being too magnanimous." He turned to the chosen. "All of you, tell me how much you owe, and tell me how much Xianxia and the other two owe too." Patriarch 9 had also been somewhat enlightened now. He knew that to sever a karma infection was something of great importance to these chosen. To Jai Zulin and the others, it was clear that great fortune had just arrived. Having just been enlightened about such a great truth, they immediately responded. 7,650,000. 9,180,000. 14 million. 8,330,000. Altogether, Xianxia and the other two probably don't owe more than 30 million. When the youthful-looking Patriarch 9 heard how many spirit stones were involved, he stared in shock. then looked deeply at Meng Hao. "Young friend, you really are very magnanimous. In the future, you'll surely be incredibly rich." "You're too kind, really," said Meng Hao, clearing his throat and backing up. "Since Jai Xiaxia and the other two aren't here, they can't personally return what they owe, so it doesn't count as them settling the debt." As far as he was concerned, these people from the Jai clan were a bunch of lunatics, who would possibly offer to pay back so many spirit stones. If he owed so many spirit stones to someone, he sure wouldn't pay them back, even if he were beaten to death. "Really," he said, "there's no need to be hasty. How about this? You people get back to what you were doing. My dad asked me to help out around the house, so I'll head home now." By this point he was outside the main gate. However, just as he was about to leave, a bag of holding flew out and landed in his hand. "Inside that bag are all the spirit stones owed to you from the people here. As of now, they have no karma connected to you." There was a booming sound as the Jai clan's main gate slammed shut. Meng Hao chuckled bitterly. The promissory notes in his bag of holding instantly turned to ash. Luckily, 3 remained, the ones belonging to Jai Xiaxia and the others. Since they weren't here, they wouldn't be able to resolve their karma. Meng Hao had his money, but was actually a bit depressed. Of course, what he didn't know was that collecting his debts had shaken the entire eastern lands. Countless gazes were being cast in his direction at that very moment. He looked at the Jai clan's main gate, then recalled the iron hoops in his bag of holding. He hesitated for a moment. "Fudge, who cares about all that crap he said about karma? I'm keeping the iron hoops." With that, he turned, clasped hands to the surrounding cultivators, then turned into a beam of prismatic light that shot off into the distance. He moved with such speed that in the blink of an eye, no trace of him remained. He reappeared far off in the distance, in the sky above the eastern lands. He sent divine sense out to make sure no one was watching him, and then his expression darkened. After a long moment, his eyes flickered. "I think that in the future I should get more people to write promissory notes. Getting them to personally write the notes is karma. Interesting. Perhaps these promissory notes will be of some use in the future." Eyes glittering, Meng Hao was just about to allow the immortal ancient Tao medallion to guide him to the Taoist right temple when suddenly, he stopped in place. "If I remember correctly, I still owe money to some people too. I owe Steward Joe 3 pieces of silver." When he considered the matter, something about it didn't seem right. But when went looking for him before, Steward Joe was already dead. Should I go find his descendants? Og, that damned patriarch Reliance has the state of Zhao on his back, and he left the lands of South Heaven. How am I supposed to settle that karma? After a moment he smiled bitterly. Shaking his head, he sighed, then sent some divine sense into the immortal ancient Tao medallion. Following its guidance, he headed off into the distance. Several days later, Meng Hao appeared at the edge of a boundless mountain range in the depths of the eastern lands, then vanished as he entered the mountains. As he proceeded along, he saw no signs of life. He passed many treacherous locations and faced quite a few dangers. As he traveled further into the mountains, the air above became restricted, and eruptions of black mist occurred frequently. Despite Meng Hao's incredibly powerful fleshly body, he could still be injured by that black mist, which filled his heart with trepidation after it happened a few times. "They don't seem like restrictive spells," he thought. "Could it be that somebody buried something here? Whatever they are, they're incredibly dangerous." After some careful examination, Meng Hao was certain that there were items buried beneath the ground that would explode if stepped on. There were also naturally occurring restrictive spells which, if he got caught in their explosions, would certainly cause his cultivation base to drop. Thankfully, the immortal ancient Tao medallion was very effective at avoiding both the restrictive spells and the objects buried underground. Using the medallion's guidance, he proceeded for several days without incident. Finally, he found himself on a narrow path that cut deep through the mountains, so narrow he could only see a sliver of sky above. This path was also laced with the buried explosive objects. Thankfully, with the medallion's help and utmost caution, he proceeded along it for some time without incident. 3 eruptions occurred, but in the end, he finally found himself in front of a rundown old temple. This chapter was sponsored by Masaki. Chapter 806, The Wind Stirs in the Ninth Mountain and Sea. 20 days earlier on planet South Heaven, Meng Hao's father had slashed out with his sword, sending sword chi down onto the eastern lands. It pierced into a mountain range, to a dilapidated old temple, whereupon the illusory images of a Taoist right temple appeared. The whole thing had been unsealed by Meng Hao's father. When such a thing happened, it was only the beginning. The invisible ripples that spread out were very difficult to conceal, and made their way from planet South Heaven out into the starry sky, whereupon many almighty figures sensed them. On planet East Victory, about half of the entire planet belonged to the Fang clan. Actually, if the clan wished it, they could easily take control of the entire planet. When the invisible ripples spread out from the immortal ancient Taoist Right Temple on planet South Heaven, an ancient voice floated out from inside of an archaic temple on planet East Victory. So another immortal ancient Taoist Right Temple has been unsealed, and in the lands of South Heaven, have the array chosen of the clan go to acquire good fortune. Fang Xianxian, Fang Yuni, Fang Donghan, you three have a predestined connection to go seek your fortunes there. Your clan uncle Fang Ziyufeng is there on South Heaven, so he might be able to provide you with some assistance. For the other clan disciples, although you might not have the destiny if you wish to go, you may. The voice echoed out throughout the entire planet, and in response, incredible energy surged up from three specific locations. One was a lake, on the surface of which was a solitary boat. Sitting cross-legged in the boat was a woman wearing white garments who seemed graceful in an otherworldly way. Her long, lustrous hair fell like a cape down her back, and she seemed ethereal, beyond that which was mortal. On either side of her were two indistinct figures, guards there to protect her at all times. The woman's eyelashes fluttered as her eyes opened. If this is your order, Patriarch, then Xianxia will definitely make the trip. In another location was a wild stretch of mountains constantly filled by the roars of wild beasts so shocking they seemed capable of ripping the sky apart. This place was actually referred to as a restricted area and was incredibly dangerous. Standing there in the mountains was a bare-chested young man locked in deadly combat with a gigantic ape that glowed with glittering golden light. The ape roared, and shockingly, a Dharma idol appeared. However, the vicious young man still managed to rip the ape in half, showering himself with copious amounts of blood. Immortal ancient Taoist Right Temple, said the young man. That means an immortal ancient Taoist medallion will certainly appear. Fang Wei is out training and won't be back any time soon. This good fortune will certainly fall to me, Fang Donghan. He drank a huge mouthful of ape blood, then rose to his feet. Two beautiful women materialized, not with physical bodies but with spirit bodies. Any worldly wise person would know at a glance that these were wind spirit bodies, something only members of the wind spirit people could possess. Few of their people existed like this. Only a handful in any given generation were born suitable to cultivate this type of wind magic. The two women picked up a cloak, which they draped over the young man. The third location was an enormous basin filled with countless chunks of broken stone. These were no ordinary stones. Each and every one came from outside in the starry sky and had fallen to this place as meteors. As a result, the basin was filled with incredible pressure, and any cultivator inside would find it hard to take even a few steps. When inside, it felt as if one's entire body were bound tightly, and if you forced yourself to walk, your body might explode. Currently, a young man could be seen sitting cross-legged in the depths of the basin. He had no hair and wore golden clothing. Cracking sounds rang out from inside him. His fleshly body was powerful to the extreme. In fact, he could rely on that power alone to resist the shocking pressure surrounding him. After a few moments passed, he opened his eyes. Within each of his eyes was the image of what appeared to be a planet, bizarre and strange. Interesting, an immortal ancient Tao medallion. If I could acquire that and give it to goddess Jixiang, it would probably improve her impression of me. The bald young man smiled and rose to his feet. He walked out of the basin, where he was met by two old men who stood guard at his side. In addition to these three people, there were more than 10 others from planet East Victory who chose to compete for this particular opportunity. Meanwhile, a slender young man stood in the middle of a desert on planet West Felicity. He wore a green robe that swayed in the wind, and the sword strapped to his back emanated a monstrous sword aura that made the desert around him seem like a lake of swords. The music of a Tao floated in the air, and the entire area seemed like a holy land. He stood there, appearing to listen respectfully to someone. After a moment, a brilliant glow appeared in his eyes. Immortal ancient Taoist Right Temple, I have the strange feeling that if I don't go, I'll regret it. In that case, I'll just have to go check it out. He smiled faintly, then transformed into a sword beam that shot off into the distance. In another location on planet West Felicity, a veiled woman sat cross-legged on a mountain peak. Demonic chi swirled about, causing wind and thunder to roll through the air. Her eyes were closed and her aura seemed demonic, and yet not, immortal and yet not. Immortal ancient Taoist Right Temple, she murmured softly, her voice mesmerizing and charming. The southern domain. She smiled as she seemed to visualize the image of a young man. Ah, why not go and see some old friends, she said. I wonder if that little punk succeeded in spirit severing. At the same time, on planet North Reed, a shocking scene was playing out. The Lee clan of the southern domain had merely been a collateral branch. The real Lee clan was extremely famous in the Ninth Mountain and Sea. Currently, a massive airship was flying out from it, fully 30,000 meters long. At the front stood 10 clan members, looking out as the ship shot through the starry sky. One of those clan members was an icily arrogant woman who sat ramrod straight at the head of the group. Moonlight flickered in her eyes, and the mark of a willow leaf could be seen on her forehead. Her expression was as cold as ice. The immortal ancient Tao medallion must be mine. There were 2 other locations on planet Northreed where similarly shocking sights could be seen. In one location, an old man suddenly materialized outside the mouth of an enormous volcano. He clasped hands and bowed deeply. Young Lord Luoden, the patriarch has issued a command. He wants you to lead some people to planet South Heaven. An immortal ancient Taoist rite temple has been activated. He wants you to go do your best to seize the good fortune. Rumble. A flame-cloaked figure strode out from inside the volcano. He stopped in front of the old man, whereupon the flames surrounding him merged together to form a flame crow that perched on his shoulder. He was a tall, strapping young man with a scar that ran from his forehead all the way down to his neck, giving him a thoroughly fearsome appearance. His garments were composed of magical flame symbols, merged together into robes. I understand, he said coolly, then made his way off into the distance. In another location was a pitch-black bamboo forest, within which lurked numerous recently deceased souls flying back and forth wildly. A young man sat cross-legged on a bamboo stem. He was handsome, with eyebrows like swords and eyes like stars, and his eyes shone brightly as he looked over at another nearby stem. On that other stem was an old man who resembled a monkey. He was staring at the young man with arrogance and contempt, and the young man was staring back at him. "You're coming with me," the young man said. "Like hell I am," the old man replied with arrogant disdain. "Your grandpa Sue has been famous for years. You think I'm going to go around with a wimpy little brat like yourself? Scram. If I was like the old me, I would already have beaten the crap out of you." 1. Grandpa Sue is most likely a character from Renegade Immortal named Su Liguo, who first appeared in chapter 128 of that book. "I'll remind you I'm surnamed Wang," the young man through gritted teeth said. "Wanga Sachmong, you bastard," the old man said impatiently. He waved his hand, sending the young man flailing backward, blood spraying from his mouth. When he rose to his feet, a ghost flitted over, stopped next to the young man, and whispered in his ear. The young man's eyes flickered with irritation. "You just wait, you crotchety scoundrel. After your young master gets the immortal ancient Tao medallion, I'm gonna come back here and boil you to death. You belong to me." "Screw off," echoed the old man's impatient voice. "Listen to Grandpa Sue and screw the hell off." The unsealing of South Heaven's immortal ancient Taoist rite temple sent great waves crashing throughout the entire Ninth Mountain and Sea. In addition to the superplanets, many other smaller powers detected the matter. Orders were issued, sending the disciples of many sects to planet South Heaven to fight for good fortune. Even the Jai clan of the Ninth Mountain was sent into motion. Their clan was located on the peak of the Ninth Mountain, where they ruled over all of the Ninth Mountain and Sea. Inside the Jai clan, several figures approached a teleportation portal. One was a tall, slender man surrounded by boundless, swirling karma. It was difficult to make out his features clearly, but the other Jai clan members backed up as he neared, expressions of reverence and fanaticism on their faces. He said nothing as he entered the teleportation portal and sat down cross-legged. When he closed his eyes, boundless karma surged around him, transforming into thin strands that glowed with brilliant light whenever they touched. Everyone who looked at the scene was dazzled, feeling as if their souls were being tugged over, completely beyond their control. This immortal ancient Taoist rite temple was activated when the son of Jai is in secluded meditation and can't emerge. I never thought that Jai Yin would choose to go. 1. This yin is the same yin from yin-yang, which connotes aspects such as the moon, darkness, hidden things, female thing, negative things. The year when those 3 fought over the title of son of Jai, the heavens and earth fell into darkness. Even the sun and moon trembled. The whole Ninth Mountain and Sea was shaken and countless people looked on. In the end, Jai Yin was defeated, and yet he is still so powerful that he is viewed as a major rival by the chosen of the 3 churches and 6 sects, the 3 great clans, and the 5 great holy lands. In this generation, not many could stand up to people like him. Although I heard that in the Fang clan there's someone named Prince Wei who beat Jai Yin in a fight once. I'm not sure if that's a true story though. The whole ninth mountain and sea was in a stir. Countless sects and clans were spurred into motion and sent chosen disciples toward the lands of South Heaven to try to acquire good fortune in the immortal ancient Taoist Rite Temple. Even the ninth sea, located between the ninth mountain and the eighth mountain, was swept into the commotion. You could call it a sea, but actually it was composed of countless fragments of heavenly bodies emanating spiritual energy, which turned into a sea of mist. Rumbling could be heard within that starry sea as an enormous door rose up. As the door appeared above the surface, countless sea dragons flew out. Trembling, they prostrated themselves before it as it emanated a boundless light, along with the music of a great Tao. It almost seemed like countless immortal divinities were sitting cross-legged in meditation surrounding the door. The energy was completely shocking. Slowly the door opened, giving view to an entire world. A woman walked out from that world. She had long hair that stretched all the way to her calves and was incredibly beautiful, as if all the charm in heaven and earth were collected on her person. She emanated the air of an orchid as she waved her hand, causing the door to close behind her and sink back down to the bottom of the sea. Currently, the 3 great Taoist societies, immortal ancient Taoist rite, only has 4 conclave disciples, murmured the woman. That's one less than my 9 seas God world. I can't let that Taoist medallion fall into anyone else's hands. She took a step forward, and a roaring sea dragon flew out obediently beneath her feet, then carried her off into the distance at top speed. In the great ninth mountain and sea, the ancient Fang clan, the 3 great clans, the 3 great Taoist societies, the 5 great holy lands, the 3 churches and 6 sects, were all mobilized into action. A vast group of chosen were all heading toward planet South Heaven. This chapter was sponsored by Eric Espinoza. Note from Deathblade. Wow, there were a lot of characters introduced in this chapter, few of whom were named. Don't worry, when they appear again later, I will link back to this chapter and provide some reminders about who they are. Chapter 807, Ancient Immortal Taoist Rite Temple. Planet South Heaven, the vast eastern lands. In the middle of a seemingly endless range of mountains was an area considered a forbidden zone by eastern lands cultivators. Even Tao-seeking cultivators who entered it would never come back out. According to rumor, fearsome entities inside had stopped countless explorers in their tracks, so that no one dared to ever enter. Even a patriarch of the Jai clan had once led a group in to search for the karma within. However, the entire force was wiped out except for the patriarch, who fled back to warn the eastern lands. Jai clan never again to set foot inside the area. Actually, that patriarch still resided in the Jai clan. He was the peak immortal realm young man who had just recently lost his arms. Even he was incapable of penetrating the depths of the mountain range. En route, his force was completely rocked by the restrictive spells. This place was a mystery relating to the lands of South Heaven, and the Jai clan patriarch did not report the matter to his superiors. He knew that there were far too many terrifying aspects to the place. He never attempted to enter the place again. As far as he was concerned, the only way to do so was with incredibly powerful clan treasures. Without such treasures, it was simply impossible. However, such powerful clan treasures were few and far between. Furthermore, considering his status in the clan, it didn't matter that he was in charge of the forces on planet South Heaven. He still did not have access to such things. The immortality bestowed Deus was one such treasure, but it possessed its own consciousness and was not something he could wield by force. Other treasures were only bestowed upon chosen disciples of the clan. No one really understood why planet South Heaven was so unique. No single power actually held complete sway. Even the Jai clan's dominant position was maintained only by the threat of their clan's military might. It was a sharp contrast to planet East Victory, where the Fang clan occupied half the planet, and yet could easily take over the entire planet if they wished. In the lands of South Heaven, there were 4 main areas, each with its own core Taoist teachings and doctrines. If one investigated the matter, it became obvious that most of the sects on South Heaven did not actually originate there. The majority were auxiliary branches of sects that existed outside its lands. It was as if most major powers wished to leave some of their core Taoist teachings and doctrines behind there. Furthermore, it was in the lands of South Heaven that Meng Hao's father had become the prison warden of the Ninth Mountain. At first, the word prison seemed to explain a lot. And yet, when Meng Hao asked about it, his father told him that the word prison actually didn't carry the usual meaning of the word. Regarding the particulars, he offered no further explanation. His expression was vague, as if he himself felt the truth was so unbelievable it left him at a loss for words. In any case, the lands of South Heaven were completely unique. Meng Hao had transcended his seventh-year tribulation there, and the League of Demon Sealers had also passed down their legacy there. Patriarch Blood Demon had hidden there when the ancient demon immortal sect was destroyed. Even more unbelievable to Meng Hao was that there was a mighty mortal empire, the Great Tang. Meng Hao was even more astonished when he thought about the Tang Emperor. One thing Meng Hao was very perplexed about was the area beneath the ancient Dao Lakes, where he had participated in the trial by fire and heard the overseer mention an ancient treaty. And there was the terrifying experience of the final level, the essence of the divine flame. All of it left Meng Hao feeling quite at a loss. Now here he was, having followed the guidance of the immortal ancient Dao medallion to this place deep in the mountains. When he caught sight of the ancient temple, his heart trembled. That was because, all of a sudden, his vision swam and he saw a completely different and unbelievable place. It was a majestic Taoist rite temple that stretched seemingly without end. Mountain peaks, vegetation, everything around him vanished. He now stood on the green limestone-paved main square of the enormous temple. Countless figures sat cross-legged around him, each so powerful that Meng Hao couldn't help but gasp. They seemed like innumerable immortal divinities sitting there in meditation. The music of great Taos floated around in all directions, and the sun and moon trembled in the sky, as if here in this place they were incapable of emitting any light. In the middle of the temple was an altar, upon which an old man sat cross-legged. He exuded the air of a transcendent being, and a faint smile could be seen on his lips as he gave a sermon on the Tao. His voice was muffled and indistinct, seeming to harmonize with and meld into heaven and earth. Meng Hao couldn't quite make out what he was saying, but he could see that many of the listeners seemed to be gaining enlightenment. It was at this point that the old man lifted his right hand up into the air, waved it about, and caused an enormous, immortal Chinese letter character to appear. It was an azure, immortal Chinese letter character. It was simply a character, and yet it caused all the colors in heaven and earth to fade. The sun and moon dimmed, and heaven and earth seemed to prostrate themselves in worship, much the same way people would. Meng Hao trembled as he looked around at the terrifying world around him. Each green slab of limestone beneath his feet seemed to emanate an indescribable energy filled with immortal qi, its intensity difficult even to comprehend. Also visible in the temple were 9 gigantic cauldrons scattered about in different locations. Puffs of green smoke wafted out of them, and numerous worlds could be seen inside the smoke as it swirled up into the air. Up in the sky were heavenly bodies. A river of stars flowed, the sun and moon rose and fell. Even more unbelievable, almighty figures could be seen flying about up there. Occasionally, one would stretch out a hand and pluck a star from the river. It would then be refined by a massive illusory hand. When the hand returned to its owner, the star would be a glittering treasure in that person's palm. Others stamped their feet onto the ground, causing massive rifts to appear. Subterranean fire would rise up and transform into living creatures resembling earth spirits. The cultivators would snatch them up and use them to pull war chariots that screamed through the sky, chariots harnessed to thousands of earth spirits. One man up in the sky laughed heartily, then spoke a few words. Popping sounds rang out as his body grew rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he was so large you couldn't even see his entire body. The only thing visible was a toe that seemed to fill the entire world as far as the eye could see. As for how large his body was, it was impossible to even imagine. Flying about and plucking stars, refining spirits from the depths of the earth, rising up to shoulder the universe. All of these images swirled together in Meng Hao's eyes, finally merging into one, into a dilapidated temple. The temple's main door was shut, and the grounds were in a state of complete disrepair. Portions of the outer wall had collapsed, so you wouldn't even need to pass through the gate, as there were entrances all around. Through these gaps, the inner temple hall could be seen, where there should have been glorious statues of deities. Presently, though, all the statues were in various states of disintegration. Their former glory now existed only in the praises uttered by later generations, and their eternal legends had long since crumbled into a void of nothingness. There was a bronze oil lamp, covered in layers of rust that told the story of its age. Oil burned within it, emanating faint popping sounds. Lamplight shone out in all directions, within which could be seen the projections of numerous shadowy figures. Other than that, everything was completely still and silent. A well could be seen in the courtyard, its bottom pitch black. Perhaps evil spirits lurked there, but it was impossible to tell. However, a single glance at the well would leave anyone scared stiff. Next to it was a bamboo trellis, covered with dried-up vines. From the look of it, a grapevine had grown up to cover the trellis many years ago, providing a shady, cool place to rest one's head. Underneath the bamboo trellis were some dried-up white flowers, which were completely unremarkable in appearance. Meng Hao stood there quietly. Everything he had seen amidst the silence suddenly made his scalp grow numb. Were it not for his father's instruction to come here, he would immediately turn around and get as far away from this place as possible. His heart trembled, and although he felt no pressure weighing down on him, he found it difficult to breathe. There was no visible danger, yet he felt an unprecedented sense of crisis in his heart. Everything about this place was completely bizarre. Why was there a temple in these mountains? Clearly it was not in harmony with its surroundings. It was as if it had flown here from some distant place in some age long past. Meng Hao took a breath, steeling himself, and stepped forward. After only a few steps, he suddenly heard the sound of weeping. It was a woman, choked with sobs, and the sound made Meng Hao's hair stand on end as it floated past. His cultivation base surged with power, and he whipped his head around to look behind him. However, he saw nothing strange. There wasn't even a wind blowing. After a moment's silence, his eyes flickered and he slapped his bag of holding. Instantly, the immortal ancient Dao medallion appeared in his hand. Meng Hao wasn't sure whether it was specifically because of the medallion, but now the place didn't seem as cold and sinister as it had. He carefully proceeded forward until he stood before the main gate. The strangeness of this place made him feel it would be best not to jump over the wall or find alternate routes in. The best way would be the straightforward and above-board way. He waved his sleeve, pushing the door of the temple open. He had assumed the door would be difficult to open, but it was. It creaked open, revealing the courtyard, the main temple hall, and the well. A cold wind blew, making it seem as if something was walking past him. Meng Hao's face flickered as the feeling grew stronger. He circulated the immortal qi inside his body, focusing it on his right eye. After blinking several times, he looked around. There was nothing except for ruins. Meng Hao chuckled bitterly. "Dad, what the hell kind of place did you send me to?" Took a deep breath and stepped inside. Overall, the temple wasn't very large, nor was the courtyard. Meng Hao glanced at the well and couldn't shake the feeling that there was something very strange about it. He studied the bamboo trellis for a moment and was just about to walk further into the courtyard when suddenly his scalp vibrated. He stopped in place and jerked his head back to look at the trellis. Panting, he walked over and looked closely at the dried-up little flowers beneath it. He couldn't prevent a look of astonishment from appearing on his face. These are resurrection lilies. Meng Hao was more than familiar with resurrection lilies and was completely astonished to find that all of the little flowers were resurrection lilies. However, these resurrection lilies were apparently just garden-variety flowers here. The scene made him breathe heavily. This place really was completely veiled in mystery. Currently, the sky was darkening as evening fell. Meng Hao hesitated for a moment as he looked around at the dilapidated statues of deities and the dust covering everything. Even the prayer mats were old and worn out, but after a moment of thought, he knelt down on one and began to offer worship to one of the broken statues. "Bless and protect me, divine immortal. Bless and protect me, divine immortal." After murmuring his worship, Meng Hao felt as if the sinister air around him had faded a bit further. Apparently his prayers were effective. As he rose to his feet, a wind blew and the lamplight flickered. Dust lifted from the ground, causing Meng Hao's eyes to narrow. Now that some of the dust had cleared, he could see that the ground had an enormous character carved into it. Immortal Chinese letter. It was the same character he had seen in the vision he had experienced moments ago, when the old man had waved his hand. It looked completely identical. When he saw the character, a crude and ancient aura blasted against his face, almost as if someone was whispering to him. It almost sounded like someone giving a sermon about the Tao, an archaic voice echoing out from ancient times. However, Meng Hao's heart lightened at the thought of his good luck. He sat down cross-legged, retrieved the immortal ancient Tao medallion, and focused all his attention on the character. This chapter was sponsored by Arhis, Gustavo Gutierrez, Mark Korzakzek, and Deathblade. Note from Deathblade: I want to thank the team for all the hard work cleaning up this chapter, especially Ann and Puffs, who really helped me fix some of the major problems. I'm pretty proud of this final product, but I wasn't happy with my initial translation. In fact, I included a note to the team, which they requested that I share with you. Here it is. A. I think it's the hardest chapter I've ever translated. B. I think the translation probably sucks. C. Chapters often have a WTF moment or two. This chapter is essentially a string of boundless WTF moments that shake heaven and earth, cause the sky to dim, and the land to quake. After reading it, my scalp went numb and my eyes were filled with a look of unprecedented disbelief. I coughed up 7 or 8 mouthfuls of blood as I thought about the chapter that seemingly contained many truths, as if the emanations of countless Taos floated through the void to the ether of another world that exists in my eyes, like the shining of 9 suns in a land of shadows and leaves, thoughtless and yet brimming with a life that seems to surge with apparent realism that is in fact false, and yet true. Thanks to Azuski, who made memes for every single chapter, even though I let him off the hook and told him he only had to make one. I also added one, so quite the gallery awaits you in the sneak peek chapter.